and welcome to the only table where the screams are the appetizers, and the fear is the main course. Pull up a chair, if you dare. Tonight, the shadows are stretching long, the floorboards are creaking with unseen footsteps, and the air is thick with a whisper you can't quite place. You're listening to the Scare Table, where we serve up the deepest, darkest, and most delightful chills the world has to offer. We have set a place just for you. Get ready to feast on true tales of terror, unsettling legends, and the bizarre happenings that defy explanation. Turn down the lights, lock the doors, and maybe check what's standing behind you. It's time to gather round the Scare Table. Let the haunting begin.
Welcome to the Scare Table. I'm Chloe. I've spent my life obsessed with the why, the dark architecture of the human mind, and the specific traumas that turn a person into a monster. On this show, I'm the profiler. I'm here to dissect the psyche of the killers and the resilience of the survivors.
And I'm Marcus. While Chloe is worried about their childhoods, I'm looking at the blade. I'm here for the visceral reality of the genre, the practical effects, the tension of the hunt, and the sheer mechanics of the kill count. If it bleeds, I'm the one measuring the splatter.
And I'm Shane, the resident architect. I'm the guy who looks at the blueprints. I'm obsessed with the rules, the tropes, and the narrative structure. If a franchise loses its way or a script breaks its own logic, I'm the one calling it out. I look at how these stories are built and whether they're strong enough to stand the test of time.
Together, we're pulling up a chair to look at horror from every possible angle. And for our very first voyage into the dark, there is only one place we could possibly start. Tonight, we are dissecting the ultimate meta-horror phenomenon, a franchise that didn't just follow the rules, but rewrote them entirely. Tonight's episode, the Scream franchise.
It's time to see what's under the mask.
To kick things off, we have to go back to 1996, Woodsboro. Before Ghostface was a household name, he was just a voice on the phone asking a very simple question. But beneath that question was a psychological trap that changed everything. Shane, take us into the atmosphere of that first script.
To understand Scream, you have to understand the era. In 1996, the slasher genre was essentially on life support. We'd seen 10 Friday the 13th movies and 6 Halloweens. The audience was bored because they were smarter than the characters on screen. Then comes Kevin Williamson's script. It was a structural revolution because it acknowledged the audience's intelligence. It didn't just give us a killer, it gave us a whodunit wrapped in a horror movie shroud. The rules were the foundation. If you knew the tropes, you had a chance. But as we saw with Casey Becker, even knowing the rules can't save you from a rigged game.
And that rigged game starts with the most iconic opening in history. Let's get visceral. Chloe, what was going on in the heads of the Woodsboro duo that made them start there?
It's a fascinating duality, Marcus. You have Billy Loomis, who is the architect of trauma. Psychologically, he's driven by a classic abandonment complex. His mother left because of his father's affair with Sydney's mother, so he projects all that rage onto Sydney. He's cold, calculated, and high-functioning. Then you have Stu Macher. He's the social nihilist. He doesn't have a tragic backstory. When he famously says, "Peer pressure, I'm far too sensitive," he's mocking the very idea of a motive. He's killing for the dopamine hit, the ultimate bored suburban teenager. Together, they create a shared psychosis, folie à deux, where they feed off each other's escalations. One provides the direction, the other provides the chaos.
That chaos translates to a very specific style of violence. Ghostface isn't a supernatural tank like Michael Myers. He trips over furniture, he gets kicked, he feels pain. But that's what makes the kills so much more intense. It feels like it could happen to you.
And while Marcus is focused on the garage door, I'm looking at the guy in the video store. Randy Meeks is the most important structural element of the first film. He is the audience surrogate. By having a character explain the rules of the slasher, don't have sex, don't drink, don't say I'll be right back, the movie creates a contract with the viewer. It says, I know that you know how this works. But the brilliance of the 1996 script is that it signs that contract and then shreds it. It gives you 2 killers when the rules say there's only 1. It arrests the primary suspect in the first 30 minutes. It uses the narrative against the narrator.
It's the perfect storm. The psychology is grounded in real-world resentment. The kills are gritty and awkward, and the story is constantly winking at the audience.
But the body count only goes up from here. We've set the table for the original, but the franchise didn't stop in Woodsboro. It went to college, it went to Hollywood, and eventually, it went digital. But first, let's put 1996 under the microscope. Everyone talks about the meta jokes, but if the kills didn't have weight, the jokes wouldn't matter. The 1996 film works because when that buck 120 knife hits, it feels heavy. Let's look at the technicality of the opening. Most slashers give you a quick throat slit and move on. Not Wes Craven. When Ghostface finally catches Casey, it's a sustained physical struggle. You see the knife go in, but it's the evisceration that set the bar. When her parents find her hanging from that tree, that's not just a prop. The makeup team used a mix of latex and internal organ molds to create a high-contrast visual against her blonde hair and white sweater. It was a visceral shock to the system that told the 90s audience, the PG-13 era is over. Now let's talk about my personal favorite, Tatum in the garage. This is the ultimate industrial kill. The struggle, it's messy. She's throwing beer bottles using the environment. The trap, she tries to escape through the doggy door. From a gore perspective, this is genius because it uses mechanical pressure. The finish, Ghostface doesn't even have to touch her. He just hits the button. You hear the motor straining, that low hum of the garage door opener, and then the crunch as her neck is crushed against the top of the frame. It's bloodless compared to Casey, but the sound design makes your own neck ache. It's a perfect example of using physics to create a visceral reaction. And we can't forget the disrespect shown to Principal Himbry. Stabbing him in his office was one thing, but gutting him and hanging him from the goalposts, that's theatrical gore. Then you have Kenny the cameraman, that throat slit on top of the news van, the way the blood pools on the windshield while Randy is inside oblivious. That's classic slasher framing. It's clean, surgical, and cold. But the most disturbing gore in the whole movie? It's not a victim. It's Billy and Stu stabbing each other. The reality. Most movies have the killer be an invincible monster. Here, they are literally taking a knife for the team. The mess. Watching Stu lose too much blood, getting woozy and feeling woozy, while Billy is methodically plunging a blade into his own friend to make it look realistic. That's a different kind of visceral. It's the gore of a fanatic.
It's interesting you bring up the self-stabbing, Marcus, because that's exactly where they circumvented the ultimate rule. Usually, the guy covered in blood is the one the police arrest. By wounding themselves, they used the victim rule to hide in plain sight. They weren't just breaking the law, they were hacking the narrative.
And psychologically, that's shared psychosis at its peak. Stu is literally dying for the movie Billy is directing. He's so deep in the role that he doesn't realize he's bleeding out for a sequel he won't be in.
He was a sensitive guy, Chloe, but he definitely didn't have the stamina for the sequel.
He definitely didn't, Marcus. And that's the tragedy of the follower archetype. Stu was so desperate for a leading role that he didn't realize he was actually just the production's first major casualty. Psychologically, his stamina failed because he had no personal conviction. He was just a mirror reflecting Billy's rage. Once the adrenaline faded and the blood loss kicked in, the mask slipped, and all that was left was a terrified kid who realized too late that peer pressure has a body count. If you want to know my favorite part of the 1996 film, it isn't a kill. It's the fountain scene. You have the core four, Sydney, Tatum, Billy, and Stu, sitting in the sun, talking about the murders like they're discussing a midterm. The tension is incredible because, as a viewer, you're watching a predator, Billy, comfort his prey, Sydney, in broad daylight. It's the ultimate display of masking. Billy is so psychologically adept that he can play the grieving, supportive boyfriend while his hands are literally still shaking from the adrenaline of the Casey Becker kill. It's chilling because it reminds us that monsters don't always hide in the woods. Sometimes they sit next to you at lunch. The one thing I would have changed? I would have given Tatum Riley a moment of realization before the garage door. Tatum was the protector, the high-functioning, fiercely loyal best friend. I would have loved to see a beat where she looks Ghostface in the eye and recognizes something familiar in the way he moves. Having her die thinking it was just a prank felt like a missed opportunity to explore the psychological betrayal of being killed by someone you probably shared a locker with. I wanted her to see the person behind the mask before the motor started. But that's just the perspective from my side of the table. Shane, you're the architect. If you could tear down one structural choice in the original script and rebuild it, what would it be? And Marcus, is there a kill in this movie that you think was lazy compared to the technical heights of the opening?
That fountain scene is a masterclass in structural irony, Chloe. But you're asking about the architect's edit? For me, it's the convenience of the cellular technology. In 1996, mobile phones were these bulky bricks that were supposedly rare, yet every high schooler in Woodsboro seemed to have one or access to a cloned line. From a narrative standpoint, it created a god mode for the killers. They could be anywhere and everywhere. If I were rebuilding the script, I would have tightened the geography of the calls. I would have forced the killers to use landlines more often, which creates a tether to a specific room. It ups the stakes because it makes the whodunit math more rigid. When a call can come from a cell phone in a bush, the logic gets a bit fluid. I'd make them work harder for their meta-commentary.
Tethered killers? That sounds like a lot of cord tripping, Shane. I like my Ghostface mobile and aggressive. Now, to Chloe's question about a lazy kill, I'm going to catch heat for this, but it's Principal Himbry. Don't get me wrong, hanging him from the goalpost was a nice theatrical touch for the third act, but the actual kill, a few stabs in a quiet office, it felt like a narrative necessity kill rather than a visceral one. The movie needed the teenagers to leave the party to go see the body, so the script just removed him. Compared to the technical choreography of the Casey Becker chase or the mechanical grind of the garage door, Himbry's death felt like a placeholder. If you're going to kill the authority figure, give me a struggle that shows he didn't just give up. Give me some office supplies used as improvised weapons. It was a missed opportunity for some gritty, close quarters technical work.
You're spot on about Himbry being a plot device, Marcus. But there's a meta layer to that kill that actually proves my point about rules. Behind the scenes, the studio was actually panicking because there was a massive 30-page stretch in the middle of the script where nobody died. Wes Craven realized that the audience's internal clock was ticking. In a slasher, if the blood stops flowing for too long, you lose the tension. So Himbry's death was literally added to the movie as a midpoint sacrifice to keep the pace up. It's a moment where the director had to follow the slaughter schedule just to keep the seats warm for the finale.
So he was a literal clock filler. Still, if you're adding a kill for the sake of the fans, make it a spectacle. But I guess the spectacle was the goalpost reveal later. I'll give Craven that. It was a hell of a way to empty a party.
And it worked. It split the group up, isolated Sydney, and set the stage for the final psychological breakdown. It's the moment where the movie within the movie really takes over.
Exactly. And that brings us to the end of our first deep dive. We've dissected the psyche, analyzed the gore, and checked the blueprints of the original 1996 masterpiece.
But the blade is still sharp, and we've got a lot of sequels to get through. The rules are about to change, the budget is about to go up, and the killers are getting even more obsessed with the spotlight.
We are now headed to Windsor College to see if the survivors can handle the sequel rules of Scream 2. Pull up a chair. The scare table is just getting started.
The ghost towns in the wake of violence. I was hellbound fast in cemetery wrong. Forgot the words to every Sunday song. I spent a lifetime gripping tight to the ledge, but I found my peace right at the jagged edge. The trial was worth the fall. The drop was worth the shrieks. The shrieks were worth the salt. The salt was worth the miles. The miles were worth the fault. The fault was worth the scars. The scars were worth the end. The end is worth the dark. The dark is why I've come. The ride is worth the fall. I've had some near misses with the holy light, and some long cold dances with the things in the night. Left some houses haunted and some blood on the floor, and I do it all again just to see them once more. Cause what I should have been is a man long dead, but I keep on walking with this price on my head. I dig my way back in. The drop was worth the streets. The streets were worth the salt. The salt was worth the miles. The miles were worth the fault. The fault was worth the scars. The scars were worth the end. The end is worth the dark. The dark is why I've come. The ride is worth the fall. The drop was worth the streaks. The streaks were worth the salt. The salt was worth the miles. The miles were worth the fault. The fault was worth the scars. The scars were worth the end. The end is worth the dark. The dark is why I've come. The ride is worth the fall.
We're back at the table. We survived Woodsboro, but the trauma didn't stay in the past. It followed Sidney Prescott to Windsor College. Tonight, we're looking at Scream 2, a film that had the impossible task of living up to a masterpiece while proving that the sequel can be just as lethal as the original.
And the stakes are higher because the characters know they're in a sequel. The meta-awareness has evolved. We're not just talking about horror movies anymore. We're talking about the rules of the sequel. Randy Meeks is back to tell us that the body count is always higher and the death scenes are always more elaborate. Let's see if the architects held up their end of the bargain.
Oh, they held it up, Shane. From a visceral standpoint, Scream 2 is a massive upgrade. The kills aren't just messy, they're theatrical. They're staged for maximum impact in public spaces. I'm ready to break down the physics of that soundstage chase and the brutality of the theater opening. Let's get into it.
Psychologically, this movie shifts from teenage nihilism to targeted obsession. We have two very different killers here. Mrs. Loomis, Debbie Salt. This is pathological grief. She isn't a movie buff. She's a mother who blames Sidney for her son's death. She's undergoing a total psychological break, reinventing her identity and her physical appearance to get close to her target. It's a classic Medea complex, blood for blood. Mickey Altieri. Mickey is a fascinating study in premeditated infamy. He's the first killer in the franchise who wants to get caught. He wants the trial. He wants to blame the movies for his actions. He's a natural-born killer who uses cinema as a legal defense. He's the bridge between the 90s slasher and the true crime obsession we see today.
Let's talk about that opening in the movie theater. Maureen Evans. The camouflage. Ghostface kills her in a room full of people wearing the exact same outfit. It's a brilliant use of urban camouflage. The impact. The stabbing in the theater is brutal because it's public yet invisible. The sound design. The screams of the crowd on screen drown out her real screams is visceral gut punch. The soundstage chase. This is my highlight. Gale Weathers in the recording booth. The silence of the soundproof room. Ghostface is on the other side of the glass. That's tactical tension. The kills feel more professional. This isn't a clumsy teenager. Mickey is a tactical predator.
Structurally, Scream 2 is a tightrope walk. It has to be a whodunit while acknowledging that we've seen this before. The rules. Randy's sequel rules are the blueprint, but the script circumvents them by killing the rule maker. By taking out Randy in broad daylight, the writers stripped away the audience's safety net. Introducing Stab, the movie within the movie, was a genius move. It allowed the franchise to comment on its own fame in real time. It made the meta commentary part of the physical world. The characters aren't just fighting a killer, they're fighting their own celebrity status.
One thing I love is the Sydney versus Mickey psychological standoff at the end. Mickey tries to break her by telling her she's the reason her friends are dead, that her fame is a magnet for monsters. It's a classic gaslighting technique.
I'm still hung up on the car escape scene. Sydney and Hallie crawling over a passed-out Ghostface. The tension in that scene is 10 out of 10. It's the closest the franchise ever got to pure, heart-stopping suspense without a drop of blood. Until the very end of the scene, of course.
And let's not forget the Cotton Weary factor. He was the ultimate red herring in the first film, and here he becomes the wild card. Structurally, his character arc is the most satisfying because it plays with the audience's suspicion right until the final trigger pull.
So, guys, if you had to pick the most impactful moment of the sequel, what is it? For me, it's Randy's death. It's the moment the franchise proved it was willing to kill its darlings to keep the stakes real.
I'm going with the Maureen Evans reveal at the theater. Watching the crowd realize her death wasn't a stunt is the most chilling moment in the franchise. It's visceral, public, and haunting.
I'll take the opening of Stab. It's the moment the architecture of the franchise became self-sustaining. It told us that Ghostface wasn't just a person, he was a brand.
I have to circle back to that soundstage scene, because from a psychological perspective, it's the most cruel moment in the entire sequel. We have to talk about Gale. For 2 movies, Gale Weathers has been the ultimate armor-plated careerist. She uses people as stepping stones. But in that booth, when she's trapped behind the glass and watches Dewey, the one person who actually sees her as human, get brutally stabbed, that armor doesn't just crack, it shatters. The look on her face isn't reporter Gale, it's raw, helpless trauma. She is forced to watch her own heart get ripped out while being physically incapable of reaching him. The glass isn't just a sound barrier, it's a psychological wall that separates her from her last bit of empathy.
And that's where the architect of the film really played with the audience's trust. We had already watched Randy Meeks die. The narrative shield was gone. When Dewey went down against that glass, the collective gasp in the theater was real. We didn't just think he was dead, we accepted it because the movie had already established that the rules had changed. It felt final. It felt like the heart of the franchise had been stopped.
Technically, it was a brutal bit of business. Multiple stabs to the back, the blood smear on the glass. It was designed to look like a finish. It wasn't klutzy Ghostface. It was an execution. But then, of course, we get to the end of the movie.
And Dewey is wheeled out on a stretcher. Again.
As a storyteller, that's a dangerous move. It's a fake-out that almost breaks the tension of the sequel. On one hand, you're relieved because you love the character. On the other hand, it starts to build a survivor's armor that makes the audience feel like the original trio is invincible. It's a circumvention of the very stakes the movie tried to set up with Randy's death.
It's the Teflon Dewey effect. No matter how many times I see him get carved up, the guy just keeps ticking. Psychologically, Chloe, does that make him a hero or just someone with incredibly thick skin?
It makes him a symbol of resilience, Marcus. He's the physical manifestation of the audience's hope. But it also makes Gale's reaction even more poignant. She lived through the grief of his death in that booth, and that changes a person. She can't go back to being the cold reporter after that.
It was a gamble by the writers. They wanted the impact of the tragedy without the permanent loss of the asset. But it set a precedent that the franchise would struggle with for years. How do you keep the kills visceral and real if the main cast has a permanent get-out-of-the-morgue-free card?
All right, before we pack up the Windsor College files, I have to ask the experts. Shane, Marcus, if you had the red pen in your hand, what is the one thing you would change about Scream 2 and why?
For me, it's the rules monologue. Don't get me wrong, I love Randy, but in the first film, the rules felt like a survival guide. In the sequel, they felt a bit like a script requirement. If I were rebuilding the architecture, I would have had the killers actively subverting the rules in a way that Randy couldn't predict. I wanted to see Randy's expertise fail him, not just because he got caught, but because the logic of the sequel had evolved past him. Make the narrative even more hostile to the expert.
That's a writer's tweak, Shane. I'm going for the throat. The one thing I'd change? The death of Cece Cooper. It's a great scene. Sarah Michelle Gellar is a horror icon, but the kill itself? She gets thrown off a balcony. It's a gravity kill. In a movie that prides itself on the visceral nature of the blade, I felt like we were robbed of a more technical, close-quarters struggle. I would have kept her inside the house longer. I wanted to see Ghostface use that sorority house environment, the trophies, the furniture, the Greek life props, to create something more grounded and brutal. Throwing her off the roof felt like a quick way to get to the next scene. I wanted more impact, less fall.
Fair enough. It was a bit of a cinematic shortcut. What about you, Chloe? You've been looking at the psyche of this whole campus. What's the one psychological thread you'd pull?
I would have changed Hallie's death. Not because of the gore, Marcus, but because of the psychological payoff. Hallie was the voice of reason. She was the one telling Sydney to run and never look back. To have her survive that incredible car escape, one of the most high-tension sequences in the series, only to be killed 3 feet away because Sydney went back to check the mask, it felt like the movie was punishing Sydney's growth. I would have had Hallie survive until the final stage. I wanted to see how she handled the psychological pressure of the stage reveal alongside Sydney. Having her die as a stunt kill right after that car scene felt like a waste of a great survivor's perspective.
It was definitely a gut punch kill. But I guess in a sequel, nobody, not even the best friend, is safe.
You know, Chloe, it's funny you mention Hallie and Derek, because from a structural standpoint, that waste of a character was actually a total emergency pivot. If we're talking about the blueprints of Scream 2, we have to talk about the internet leak of '97. The original script leaked online back when the web was still the Wild West, and in that version, the rules were even more devastating. The killers weren't Mickey and Mrs. Loomis, they were Derek and Hallie. The original architecture was designed to mirror the first film's betrayal, but double it. It was going to be the boyfriend and the best friend again, proving that Sydney's trauma was an inescapable cycle. But because the script got out, Kevin Williamson and the team had to scrap the foundation mid-build. They essentially had to reskin the house while the walls were already up. That's why Derek's death feels so tragic. He was literally written to be the monster, then rewritten at the last second to be the innocent victim dying to prove his love. It's a fascinating case of the real-world audience forcing the architect to change the ending.
That explains why Hallie's death felt so sudden. She went from being the mastermind to a wrong place, wrong time casualty. It's a visceral reminder that in this franchise, even the writers are sometimes reacting to Ghostface-level chaos behind the scenes.
It also adds a layer to Sydney's paranoia. Imagine the psychological toll of knowing that even the people who didn't kill you were supposed to. It makes the world feel even more unstable.
Exactly. It was the first time the internet actually reached into a movie and changed the outcome. But if you think a script leak was chaotic, just wait until we get to the production of the third installment.
Yeah, Hollywood is where things get really explosive. Literally.
All right, the Windsor College case is officially closed. Next stop, Sunrise Studios, Los Angeles. We're diving into the trilogy rules, the secret history of Maureen Prescott, and the most controversial voice changer in the business.
Let's head to Hollywood. Scream 3 is on the table.
GhostfaceHorror.com. Hello, Sydney. Welcome to the frequency. Something's wrong, I can feel it. It's that 3117 chill. 6 minutes of carnage. The signal didn't fade. We aren't just taking chances. We're rewriting the DNA. I'm beginning to feel like a phantom in the machine. Look, I was gonna go easy, keep the crime scene clean, but I'm bananas, B-A-N-A-N-A-S, forensic art at the flow. I'm the shape in the shadows, watch the dark orange glow. Knives coming at you with that supernatural speed. Superhuman innovator, planting every dark seed. What I gotta do to get it through to you? I'm the legend in the mask, devastating the audience. It's a monumental task. I'm a titan, I'm a giant, I'm the ghost on the dial. Broadcasting from overtake, yeah, it's been a long while. I'm the reason they're shaking, I'm the glitch in their head. I'm 96, big 6, the voice of the dead. I don't need a label or a fake industry deal. I'm a renegade rebel spinning this cinematic wheel. They wanna cancel the name, let them try to stop the fire. I'm the king of the basement, climbing higher and higher. I'm beginning to feel like a horror rock god, locked in God mode. Studio 3117, watch the system explode. From the front to the back, let the heavy bass nod. I'm a monster, a myth, I'm a lightning rod. A horror rock god, I'm in God mode. Paving the road where the blood is flowed. Breaking the rules, shattering the code. Carrying the culture while the heavens erode. Summa lumma dooma lumma, it's the horror you're assuming. In the booth with the spirits, hear the subwoofers booming. It's the 90s heaven, they boost the genre's foundation. Mixed with the digital pulse of a new generation. I'm the truth in the silence, I'm the shadow on the wall. I'm the one who stands tall when the other guys fall. Forensic with the bars, audit every single line. Studio 3117, the design is divine. I'm beginning to feel like a horror rock god, locked in God mode. Studio 3117, watch the system explode. From the front to the back, let the heavy bass nod. I'm a monster, a myth, I'm a lightning rod. A horror rock god, I'm in God mode. Paving the road where the blood is flowed. Breaking the rules, shattering the code. Carrying the culture while the heavens erode. Step into the gallery of the icons of fear, where the legends are born and the exits disappear. I'm the silent white mask staring back from the porch, the undying flame that's still holding the torch. I'm the dream weaver's glove with the razors for fingers, the smell of the sulfur that permanently lingers. I'm the hockey mask dripping at the edge of the lake, the ultimate price that the visual will take. I'm the voice on the phone asking what is your favorite, the soul-tearing puzzle if you're daring to brave it. I'm the chainsaw that's screaming through the Texas heat, the ancient dead rising with the words you repeat. I'm the killer doll with the life in its eyes, the hidden perspective in the world of disguise. Audit the nightmare, examine the soul. Studio 3117 has total control. I'm beginning to feel like a horror rock god, locked in God mode. Studio 3117, watch the system explode. From the front to the back, let the heavy bass nod. I'm a monster, a myth, I'm a lightning rod. A horror rock god, I'm in God mode. Paving the road where the blood is flowed. Breaking the rules, shattering the code. Carrying the culture while the heavens erode. Why be a king when you can be a god in the dead zone? We don't fear the facade, standing against the grain, taking the path that's odd. I'm the lightning, I'm the thunder, I'm a god. Horror rockin' god. GhostfaceHorror.com.
We've made it to the bright lights of Hollywood, but the sunshine doesn't make the shadows any less lethal. Tonight, we're dissecting Scream 3. This is the film that took us out of the suburbs and onto a movie set, turning the franchise's meta-commentary inward until it started eating itself. It's the final chapter of the original trilogy, and the stakes have shifted from the rules of a sequel to the rules of a trilogy.
And the rules of a trilogy are clear. All bets are off. You go back to the beginning. You discover something that wasn't true before. The architect of this installment had to weave a secret history that connected everything back to Maureen Prescott. And let's just say, the blueprints got a little complicated this time around. Between script rewrites and a shift in tone, Scream 3 is the most debated structure in the series.
It's definitely the weird one, Shane. We're talking about an explosive house, a supernatural voice changer, and a solo killer who was working at a professional level. From a visceral standpoint, it's less about the messy high school stabbings and more about the theatricality of a Hollywood set. I'm ready to dig into the mechanics of that solo hunt.
Psychologically, Scream 3 is a deep dive into sibling rivalry and rejection. Roman Bridger, he is the ultimate shadow child. He suffers from a massive abandonment complex. He was the son Maureen Prescott didn't want, the secret she buried in Hollywood. While Sydney was getting the final girl fame, Roman was watching from the sidelines, festering in his own insignificance. Roman is unique because he claims he started it all. He didn't just wear the mask, he claims he directed Billy and Stu. Psychologically, this is a God complex. He's not just a killer, he's the creator of the trauma. He's trying to rewrite his own origin story by erasing the star of the show, his sister.
Let's talk about the body count. Roman is the only solo killer in the film franchise, and he is a workhorse. I know the magic voice changer is a point of contention, but from a visceral perspective, it's a terrifying weapon. It allows the killer to gaslight the victim before the blade even comes out. The explosion. The house explosion at Jennifer Jolie's place? That's a massive jump in scale. It moves the franchise from slasher to action horror. The Sarah Darling kill, this is my highlight. It's set in the prop room among the costumes and the lighting. It's classic Hollywood gore, using the tools of the trade to hunt. When Roman finally catches her, it's surgical. He's efficient because he doesn't have a clumsy partner to look out for.
Structurally, this movie is a movie about a movie about a movie. Having the characters walk through a recreation of the original Woodsboro house is a brilliant narrative loop. It's the architect literally building the past to trap the characters in the present. To make a trilogy work, you have to retcon the beginning. We find out that Roman was the one who showed Billy the tapes of his father's affair. It changes the foundation of the 1996 film. Whether that fits the original blueprint is up for debate, but as a structural move, it ties the trilogy into a perfect, albeit messy, circle.
We have to talk about Jennifer Jolie. She is the psychological highlight of the movie. A woman playing a character, Gail, while being hunted by a real killer. Her descent from actress to survivor, and her chemistry with the real Gail, is the heart of the film.
Her death scene in the mirrors was a visual masterpiece, but it felt a little clean for my taste. I wanted more of a struggle. But man, the final fight between Sydney and Roman in the secret screening room? That was heavy. Two siblings literally tearing each other apart over a mother who didn't want either of them.
And the voice changer. Chloe, does it bother you that a piece of tech could perfectly mimic voices in 2000? It feels like a narrative cheat code that lets the killer avoid the rules of physical distance.
It's definitely a cheat, Shane. But in Hollywood, isn't everything a cheat? Everything is a facade. The tech just represents the ultimate mask. But before we move on to the next chapter, I have to ask the guys, what is the one thing about Scream 3 that you would have changed to make it a better final chapter? And Marcus, was there a kill here that actually disappointed you?
I've got a major blueprint change for this one.
I'll jump in on that. If we're talking about what I'd change, I'm looking at Cotton Weary. Look, the opening was solid. Seeing Cotton and his girlfriend Christine get hunted in that high-rise was a great way to start. It had weight because it was the only legacy kill in the entire movie. Cotton had been through the ringer since '96, and seeing him finally get taken out felt like the movie was saying, nobody is safe, not even the guys who survived the first two. But here's my visceral gripe. I would have saved him for later. Cotton was a powerhouse. He was the one guy who wasn't afraid of the mask because he'd already spent years in prison for a crime he didn't commit. I wanted to see him in the third act. I wanted to see him and Dewey squaring off, or him actually getting a piece of Roman in a real fight. Killing him in the first 10 minutes felt like burning your best fuel at the starting line. But, like we know from the production side, they were dealing with scheduling conflicts with Liev Schreiber. He was a rising star and his time was limited, so they had to chop him early. It's a shame because a late-game Cotton death would have felt like a massive blow to the team.
It's the contractual slasher rule, Marcus. Sometimes the schedule is a sharper blade than the one Ghostface is carrying. But you're right. Structurally, removing the only other person who truly knew the history of Maureen Prescott that early left Sidney completely isolated. It made the middle of the movie feel a bit like a standalone slasher until the past finally caught up with them at the mansion.
And psychologically, it was the ultimate fuck you to Cotton. He spent his whole life trying to get his reputation back. He finally gets his own show, he's a success, and then he's murdered for information he doesn't even have. It's the most cynical kill in the franchise. He died for a secret he wasn't even a part of.
Exactly. He deserved a more technical, drawn-out exit. But Roman was efficient. I'll give the kid that.
And you, Shane?
You want my architect's edit for the finale? I'm going right for the heart of the foundation. I would have removed the solo killer twist. Look, Roman being the mastermind who told Billy Loomis about his dad's affair is a bold structural move, but it almost makes the first movie feel like a puppet show. I think Scream 3 would have been much stronger if Roman had an accomplice, specifically someone from Sidney's new life in Hollywood. If you're going to do a trilogy, the architecture should reflect the growth of the characters. By making Roman a solo act, the movie becomes a monologue. If he'd had a partner, it would have kept that whodunit tension alive through the third act, rather than just becoming a family therapy session with knives.
It definitely would have made the psychological game more complex. But I think the solo killer aspect was meant to highlight Roman's isolation. He was the one child left entirely alone, so he worked alone. It's poetic, even if it's narratively lonely for the audience.
So, the trilogy ended. Sidney comes out of hiding, for good. Gail and Dewey finally got their happily ever after, and the Woodsboro murders became the stuff of legend.
You hit the nail on the head, Chloe. It was narratively lonely because it was supposed to be a duo. If you look at the early blueprints, the architecture originally included Angelina Tyler, the actress playing Sidney in Stab 3, as the second killer. She was written as a former classmate of Sidney's from Woodsboro who was obsessed with the legacy. And honestly, once you know that, you can't unsee the remnants left behind in the final cut. There are so many Ghostface in two places at once moments that only make sense if Roman had a partner. Look at the logistics of the bathroom scene or the sheer speed of the house chase. It's a house built for two that ended up with a single tenant. Even her death scene is a mess of structural ambiguity. She's stabbed, then her body is just dragged away. We never see a finishing blow. In the world of the Slayer's architecture, if you don't see the life leave the eyes, the foundation is still shaky. It's why those conspiracy theories have lived on for 26 years. Fans are still waiting for Angelina to pop back up. But let's be real, that bridge has burned. It'll never happen now, and honestly, it shouldn't. Bringing back a maybe casualty from the messy production of 2000 would just clutter the current legacy. But that's just the icebreaker, Chloe. The real story, the true structural failure of Scream 3, is what was happening behind the scenes. It was a complete architectural collapse. You had Wes Craven forced into an impossible choice: the architect who built the world or the star who inhabited it. Because of massive scheduling conflicts, Kevin Williamson and Neve Campbell couldn't be on the same timeline. Wes had to choose. And luckily, Kevin Williamson, being the legend he is and wanting the legacy he helped build to actually thrive, stepped aside. He knew Scream couldn't exist without its North Star, Sidney Prescott. So he handed over his blueprints and walked away.
And that's when the renovation began, right?
Exactly. Enter Aaron Kruger. And let's be blunt, Aaron Kruger is not Kevin Williamson. The dialogue lost that sharp meta tongue, and the rules started to feel like a checklist instead of a conversation. But Kruger didn't just have to deal with a new voice. He had to deal with a national tragedy. The Columbine High School shooting happened right in the middle of development, and it sent shockwaves through the industry. Suddenly, a movie about teenagers being hunted in a high school, the original plan for Scream 3, was radioactive. The studio demanded an instant, total revamp of the entire script. They moved the setting to Hollywood, stripped out the high school element, and toned down the visceral nature of the violence to avoid controversy. The house wasn't just remodeled, it was relocated to a different zip code overnight. That's why the movie feels like a fever dream of Hollywood satire instead of the gritty Woodsboro finale we were promised.
That explains a lot. From a gore perspective, you can feel the pullback. The kills in 3 are theatrical, sure, but they lack that mean, grounded streak the first 2 had. It felt like the movie was pulling its punches because the real world was already bleeding too much. It's the one time the franchise's meta shield actually failed. It couldn't ignore the reality outside the theater.
It's a heartbreaking context. Psychologically, you can see the strain. The movie becomes about family and secrets because that was the only safe ground left to explore. It shifted from the trauma of a generation to the trauma of a single bloodline. It turned Sydney into a hermit, hiding behind steel doors and a fake name. It wasn't just Sydney in hiding. It felt like the whole franchise was trying to hide from the cultural conversation.
It was the ultimate architect's nightmare. New writer, restricted content, and a missing lead for half the shoot. It's a miracle the movie stands up at all, even if the foundation is made of Hollywood plywood and retcons.
Well, the plywood held for a decade, but when the doors opened again in 2011, the world was a very different, very remake-hungry place.
And here's the kicker. The ghost in the blueprint that still haunts every theory thread on the internet. If the Columbine tragedy hadn't happened, and Kevin's original vision stayed intact, the Scream 3 architecture would have featured the ultimate structural collapse, the return of Stu Macher. Kevin's original plan was to reveal that Stu didn't actually die from that TV set to the head back in '96. Instead, he was orchestrating everything from a prison cell, acting as the ringleader for a new cult of teenage killers who were obsessed with the Woodsboro legacy. It would have shifted the franchise from a whodunit to a conspiracy thriller. Imagine the psychological weight of Sydney finding out her original tormentor was still pulling the strings from behind bars. It's the ultimate architect's twist. The foundation you thought was buried was actually the one holding up the new walls.
See, that would have given me the weight I've been looking for. Instead of Roman Bridger's secret sibling drama, we'd have a battle-hardened, incarcerated Stu. From a visceral perspective, seeing the scars from that 1996 finale and how he'd evolved into a seasoned manipulator, that's gold. But when the script got scrapped, Stu was left in the maybe pile, and we got the Hollywood satire instead.
It changes the whole psychological profile of the series. If Stu survives, the rules aren't just tropes. They're a doctrine being taught to a new generation by a master. It turns Ghostface into an ideology rather than just a costume. But because that was pulled, the Stu is still alive theory became the urban legend of the horror community, a narrative ghost limb that fans still feel today.
Exactly. It was a massive pivot. We went from the cult of Stu to the secret brother. But by the time 2011 rolled around, the idea of a new generation taking over wasn't just an abandoned script idea. It became the central theme of the reboot.
Before we fully close the book on Hollywood, we have to talk about the emotional anchor of Scream 3. Even though he was taken from us at Windsor College, Randy Meeks still managed to steal the show. That video cameo wasn't just a gimmick, it was a psychological lifeline for Sydney and the audience. Seeing Randy again, even on a flickering tape, reminded us that there was a method to the madness. It was like a voice from the beyond trying to provide a blueprint for a house that was already on fire.
And he didn't just show up to say hi, he came to deliver the trilogy architecture. Randy knew that if Sydney was in a third chapter, the foundation had shifted again. He laid out the rules to survive a trilogy with that classic video store authority. You have a killer who is superhuman, not literally supernatural, but someone with a god complex who can survive things a normal person shouldn't. Anyone, including the main character, can die. The final girl status is no longer a guarantee. The past will come back to haunt you. Whatever you think you know about the beginning is wrong. It was the ultimate narrative cheat sheet. Randy was basically telling the characters, the architect is going to try to retcon your origin story. Watch your back.
It was also the introduction of Martha Meeks, Randy's sister. She's the one who delivers the last will and testament of the horror geek. It was a nice touch to keep the Meeks bloodline in the mix, even if the whole scene felt incredibly shoehorned in. Let's be honest, the idea that Randy just happened to film a "In Case I Die in a Trilogy" video, and his sister just happened to track them down on a Hollywood set at the exact right moment? It's a bit of a stretch, even for this franchise, but it was a necessary bridge to get those rules into the script.
It was a total Deus Ex Randy. The writers needed the rules, but they'd already killed the rule maker, so they had to invent a delivery system.
Exactly. But keep an eye on Martha. She disappears for a while, but that Meeks legacy is going to come back around in a big way when we eventually get to the requel era. The bloodline is stronger than we think.
It's a beautiful, tragic legacy. Randy died for the rules, and his sister made sure those rules lived on to save his friends. Now, with the trilogy rules firmly in place, we can finally leave the 90s behind.
All right, the Hollywood lights are fading. Let's get back to the real world, or as real as it gets in Woodsboro. Scream 4 is calling.
And we will be right back to relive 2011.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every trail you leave, every sob you hear, I'll be stalking you every single day, every prayer you say, every lock you break, every step you take. I'll be haunting you. Oh, can't you see? Your life belongs to me. How my cold blade aches with every breath you take. Every move you make, every bond you break, every scream you fake, every soul I take. I'll be watching you. Since you ran, I've been right behind your pace. I dream at night of the terror on your face. I look around, but there's nowhere you can hide. I feel the cold and I'm coming for your life. Keep on crying, baby, baby, please. Oh, can't you see? Your life belongs to me. How my cold blade aches with every breath you take. Every move you make, every vow you break, every scream you fake, every soul I take. I'll be watching you. Every move you make, every step you take, I'll be watching you. I'll be watching you.
I'll be watching you.
We are back in Woodsboro. It's 2011, and the world has moved on from landlines and VHS tapes to live streams and Twitter. We're dissecting Scream 4. This isn't just a sequel, it's a reboot-quel. It's the film that asks the question, how do you survive a horror movie when the killer isn't just following the rules, they're trying to out-meta the original?
And the architecture of this one is fascinating. After the Hollywood detour of 3, Wes Craven and Kevin Williamson finally reunited to bring the franchise back to its roots. But the roots had grown into something twisted. The new rules aren't about survival anymore, they're about fame. The architect didn't just build a house this time, he built a stage. Everything in Scream 4 is designed to be filmed, shared, and liked. It's a blueprint for the social media age before we even knew how dark that road would go.
It's a return to form for the visceral side, too. After the sanitized violence of the third film, Scream 4 came out swinging. The kills are meaner, the blade is sharper, and the technical choreography of the chases feels like classic Craven. I'm ready to talk about how the remake logic led to some of the most brutal moments in the series.
We have to start with that opening. It is a structural masterpiece of misdirection. You think you're watching the movie, but you're watching Stab 6. Then you think you're watching the real world, but it's Stab 7. It tells the audience right away, your expertise is a liability. The architect is mocking the fact that we've seen it all. By the time we get to the real Jenny and Marnie, the lines between reality and fiction are so blurred that the violence feels twice as shocking when it actually hits.
And when it hits hard. That phone call in the kitchen, "I'm not in the closet," followed by Marnie being hurled through the glass, that's the visceral weight we were missing. It was a statement, the 90s are over, and the new Ghostface doesn't play around.
Psychologically, we have to talk about Jill Roberts. Jill is one of the most chilling villains in horror history because her motive is so painfully modern. She doesn't want revenge. She doesn't have a secret brother grudge. She just wants the victimhood capital. She wants the book deals, the talk shows, and the survivor status that Sydney has. She's essentially producing her own life. She's willing to butcher her friends and her own mother just to secure a lead role in the news cycle. It's a study in psychopathy fueled by digital envy. She doesn't just want to kill Sydney, she wants to replace her.
If we're talking kills, we have to talk about Olivia Morris. That bedroom kill is top tier. Ghostface is literally in the closet this time, and the way he uses the environment, smashing her through the window while Sydney and Jill watch from across the way, it's a performance kill. The amount of blood in that room was a clear signal that the Columbine-era restrictions were gone. It was messy, it was high contrast, and it felt like Wes was letting the beast off the leash.
And then there's the self-mutilation. Chloe, you mentioned Jill's psychology, but Marcus, the technical work she does on herself at the end, that's the most visceral scene in the movie.
Agreed. Throwing herself through a glass table, pulling out her own hair, stabbing herself in the shoulder. It was a one-man technical gore show. She was literally carving her own lie into her skin.
It's the ultimate commitment to the bit. She understood the rules better than anyone. To be the hero, you have to be the one who suffered the most.
But the architect had one more trick up his sleeve. The original rule that Jill forgot. Don't fuck with the original.
Exactly. Clear. The best use of a defibrillator in cinema history.
So guys, Scream 4 was meant to be the start of a new trilogy. But for a long time, it looked like the end of the road. What was the one thing that made this remake work for you?
For me, it was the cynical ending. Before the hospital scene was added, the movie originally ended with Jill getting away with it. That would have been a structural gut punch.
I'm staying with the kills. It proved that Ghostface could still be scary in a world where everyone has a camera. It made the unseen predator feel real again.
Let's peel back the layers on Jill and Charlie, because this is where the franchise moves from slasher to a terrifyingly accurate psychological profile of the digital age. Jill Roberts is a masterpiece of high-functioning sociopathy. Unlike Billy, who was driven by mother issues, or Roman, who wanted family recognition, Jill is motivated by the scarcity of fame. She grew up in the shadow of Sidney Prescott's trauma. In Woodsboro, Sidney is royalty because she's a survivor. Jill looks at that and doesn't see tragedy. She sees a monetizable brand. Her mindset is the producer. She doesn't just want to kill, she wants to curate her own tragedy. She views her friends, her mother, and even her boyfriend as disposable props in a high-stakes audition for the world's stage. She has no empathy because her reality is entirely performative. She is playing the new final girl so convincingly that she almost tricks the audience. Her internal monologue isn't, "I hate Sidney," it's, "I deserve Sidney's spotlight, and I'll pay any price in someone else's blood to get it." Charlie Walker, on the other hand, is the incel's archetype of the horror geek. He's the dark Randy. While Randy Meeks used his knowledge to protect people and understand the genre, Charlie uses it as a weapon of resentment. His mindset is rooted in entitlement. He feels that because he is the expert, he deserves the girl, the recognition, and the power. He's the perfect incel light accomplice. He's obsessed with the rules, but he's bitter that the rules haven't made him the leading man. Jill plays him like a violin. She uses his desire for the movie geek fantasy to turn him into her attack dog. He's not a mastermind. He's a technician who thinks he's co-directing, when in reality, he's just a line item in Jill's budget that she intends to cut before the credits roll.
It's a brutal dynamic. Structurally, it's the most lopsided partnership in the series. In every other movie, there was at least a semblance of a shared goal. Here, Jill is the architect, and Charlie is just the guy she hired to lay the bricks before she blows up the house with him inside.
And that's why his death is so visceral in its simplicity. She doesn't even use a Ghostface trick on him. She just stabs him in the heart and the stomach. Clean, fast, and surgical. It's the ultimate "your contract is terminated" move. No mask, just the person he thought loved him, showing him exactly what he was worth. Nothing.
Exactly. Jill is the first killer who understood that in the 21st century, the most dangerous person isn't the one with the knife, it's the one with the story.
All right, let's get into the anatomy of the carnage. If Scream 3 was a bloodless Hollywood stage play, Scream 4 was Wes Craven coming home to reclaim his title. From a visceral perspective, this movie is mean. It has a jagged, modern edge to it that really emphasizes how much the remake era upped the ante on brutality. The kills weren't just about the blade, they were about the technicality of the hunt. Let's break down the gore and the secrets behind the scenes. If you want to talk about a perfect technical kill, it's Olivia Morris. This is the architectural center of the movie's violence. It's a total assault. She gets stabbed through the hand, then in the shoulder, and finally gutted in her own bed while her friends watch from the house next door. The technical aspect of her being thrown through the window and the amount of blood on that white bedspread, that was Wes signaling that the 90s were over. Here's a technical secret. Most of the knives you see in Scream 4 are actually CGI. Wes wanted the stabs to look deeper and more realistic than a collapsible prop knife could manage. If you look closely at Olivia's room, it is absolutely painted in blood. Yet, interestingly enough, when Ghostface attacks Sidney and Jill just seconds later, the suit is spotless. It's one of those continuity errors that happens when you're pushing the limits of the gore. We mentioned the opening within an opening, but the real kill of Jenny and Marnie has some fascinating behind-the-scenes history. There's an alternate opening that was much, much meaner. In the original version, Marnie is killed while Jenny thinks it's all a prank. She actually watches her friend get butchered and laughs, saying, "Real original, assholes," before realizing it's real. Test audiences found it too cruel, so Wes reshot it to the version we see now, where they both know they're being hunted. In the deeper lore of the script, Jenny was originally intended to be the girl Trevor cheated on Jill with. It would have made that opening kill a very personal, very visceral bit of rebranding by Jill. Then we have the death of Deputy Perkins. This is the most debated kill in the movie. He gets a knife straight through the forehead, stumbles out of the car, and delivers the line, "F*** Bruce Willis," before dropping. A lot of fans thought this was jumping the shark, but Wes actually fought for it. He'd seen a documentary about a man who was stabbed in the head, the knife went through the skull, and the guy literally walked into the emergency room fully conscious. Wes loved the idea of a kill that was so technically impossible that it felt real. It was his way of using stranger-than-fiction logic to catch the audience off guard.
It's a fascinating pivot, Marcus. You can see the architect trying to balance the technical advancements of 2011 with the grounded terror of 1996. The use of CGI knives allowed them to do things with the physics of the kill that weren't possible in the original trilogy.
And psychologically, that Olivia kill is the most damaging. It wasn't just a murder, it was a performance. It was Jill showing Sydney exactly how much she was willing to destroy her own social circle to get the story she wanted.
All right, let's look at the actual skeleton of Scream 4, because the architecture of this film is a fascinating mess of what could have been. When Kevin Williamson and Wes Craven reunited, they weren't just building a movie, they were trying to launch a brand new trilogy. But the foundation was constantly shifting beneath them due to studio interference and a changing cultural landscape. We talked about Scream 3 and how Aaron Kruger stepped in, but a lot of people don't realize he was actually brought back for Scream 4 as well. Kevin Williamson wrote a massive, sprawling script that was meant to set up Scream 5 and 6 immediately. But the studio, specifically the Weinsteins, wanted more immediate payoffs. They brought Kruger in to do punch-ups and rewrites, which led to a lot of friction on set. That's why some of the dialogue feels like classic Kevin, and other parts feel a bit more procedural. The architect was fighting with the contractor the whole time. Structurally, the Stabathon was supposed to be the ultimate set piece. In the original blueprints, this was a much longer sequence. It was intended to be a mirror of the party at Stu Macher's house, but updated for the digital crowd. They actually filmed way more footage of the fans interacting and the meta-atmosphere of the party, but much of it was left on the cutting room floor to keep the pacing tight. This is also where the Kirby Lives seeds were sown. Wes Craven purposefully left her fate ambiguous. He made sure she was still moving when the camera panned away, because the plan was always to bring her back as the new Randy for the next installment. He was protecting his assets for the future of the franchise. We have to talk about the ending again, because it changes the entire plot analysis. Originally, the movie didn't end with a heroic showdown. It was a cynical, nihilistic masterpiece. Jill was supposed to get away with it entirely. The film would have ended with her being the sole survivor, the new Sydney, and the ultimate celebrity victim. The original plan for Scream 5 was that Sydney would have amnesia from her injuries, and Jill would be visiting her in the hospital, terrified that Sydney's memory would return and expose her. It would have turned the franchise into a psychological cat-and-mouse game. But the studio got cold feet. They didn't think the audience could handle the villain winning. So, they built the hospital extension we see today to give the legacy trio the win. One fun bit of technical trivia, the cameos in the opening, Lucy Hale, Shanae Grimes, Anna Paquin, and Kristen Bell, were all shot in a very tight window. Wes wanted those fake openings to feel like genuine, high-budget Hollywood slasher films to contrast with the more grounded, grittier, real Woodsboro. It was a way of the architect acknowledging that the Stab franchise had become its own monster, separate from the reality of the characters.
It's a lot of moving parts for one house, Shane. You can tell they were trying to build for the future while paying rent to the past. It makes the kills feel like they're serving two different masters.
And psychologically, it's a miracle it works. The tension between the legacy trio and the new generation is palpable, and that actually feeds into Jill's motive. She's fighting the script as much as she's fighting Sydney.
Exactly. It was a bridge between eras. It would be the last time Wes Craven sat in the director's chair, and in a way, it was his final lesson on how to subvert the genre he helped create.
A hell of a way to go out. But the blade wasn't put away for good.
But it would take another 11 years for the blueprints to be dusted off. And this time, they weren't just making a sequel or a remake.
11 years of silence followed. The world moved into the elevated horror era. A24 became the new gold standard. And the fans, well, the fans got even more protective. They were making a requel, where the fans become the architects and the bloodline becomes the target.
So let's talk about the requel.
All right, if you say so. The table is moving to 2022. Let's talk about the return to Woodsboro and the rise of the elevated fan.
Darkness falls and the phone is dead. Another party, now they're filling up with dread. They whispered her name, said she was too sweet, but the blade came down and she stood on her own 2 feet. Blood on the floor, the cycle's on the run. She didn't freeze up, didn't need a gun, just a broken chair, a lamppost or a pickaxe swing. Hear the sirens scream, hear the death bells ring. They thought the sequel was already written, thought she was broken, thought she was beaten. But the night is long and she's got a fire inside, nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide for you. She's the last one standing. The credit roll is her command. You can't keep a good girl down, not when she's got a broken crown. She's the last one standing. She's got the scars to understand. From Elm Street nightmares to a cabin by the lake, they underestimated the strength it would take. Lori with the hangers, Sydney with the wits, Nancy facing shadows, shattering them stupids. Through the woods, the city, the abandoned home, she climbed out of the grave on her own. She roams. You can wear the mask, you can sharpen the steel, but she's got a wound that only victory can heal. Thought the sequel was already written, thought she was broken, thought she was beaten. But the night is long and she's got a fire inside, nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide for you. She's the last one standing. The credit roll is her command. You can't keep a good girl down, not when she's got a broken crown. She's the last one standing. She's got the scars to understand. Walk away in the morning light, covered in the night's despair, but she'll be back. She doesn't care. She doesn't wait for rescue. She doesn't need a man. She holds the bloody fate in the palm of her hand. They always come back, but she comes back harder, harder. She's the last one standing. The credit roll is her command. You can't keep a good girl down, not when she's got a broken crown. She's the last one standing. She's got the scars to understand. She's the last one standing. The credit roll is her command. Keep a good girl down, not when she's got a broken crown. She's the last one standing. She's got the scars to understand. Your scars, your scars, you're so girl.
Whoa, hold the phone. Before we step into the 2022 requel era, we have to address the massive structural detour that happened while the film franchise was in hibernation. We cannot ignore the Scream TV series. It's like the architect built a guest house in a completely different style across town. Some people loved the modern amenities, but the purists were screaming that the foundation was missing the Ghostface stone.
Oh, you mean the Brandon James era? Whew, talk about a technical shift. They didn't even use the classic Fun World mask for the first 2 seasons. They went with that post-op surgical look, the Brandon James mask. From a visceral standpoint, I actually appreciated that it was tied to the town's specific lore. But let's be real, without the iconic Ghostface mask and Roger L. Jackson's voice, it felt like a Scream-adjacent project rather than a true entry in the ledger.
Exactly. And the architecture was totally different. It was a long-form slasher, which is a nightmare to build. You have to sustain tension over 10 episodes instead of 2 hours. Seasons 1 and 2 followed Emma Duval and the Lakewood Six. It was basically Pretty Little Liars with a body count. They tried to replicate the movie's archetypes. Noah Foster was the new Randy, Brooke was the new Tatum, but it struggled because it was non-canon. It didn't exist in the Sidney Prescott universe, which made the stakes feel isolated for the fans. The Season 3 reset brought Scream Resurrection. They finally brought back the classic mask and Roger L. Jackson's voice, moved to Atlanta, and turned it into an anthology. But by then, the brand was fractured. It felt like they were trying to fix the plumbing when the house was already slated for demolition.
Psychologically, the show was a fascinating experiment in trauma legacies. The Brandon James story was all about how a town's history can be weaponized against a new generation. But because it wasn't connected to the 96 murders, it lacked that visceral legacy weight. However, it did keep the meta conversation alive. Noah's podcast, The Morgue, was basically the spiritual predecessor to our scare table. It proved that the slasher expert was still a vital part of the story.
But here's the real behind-the-scenes architecture. The show was originally meant to be much darker. There was a lot of shifting in showrunners. Jill Bloedvogel led the first season, but then things got messy with creative differences for the second. And let's talk about the Wes Craven connection. He was an executive producer, and his passing in 2015 hit the production hard. It lost its North Star. A lot of people don't know that there were plans for a Season 3 that would have wrapped up the Lakewood story. But when the rights moved and the production changed hands, that blueprint was shredded. We never got the final answer to who was on the other end of that Season 2 finale phone call. It's a literal unfinished floor in the franchise.
It was an experiment that proved one thing. If you're going to call it Scream, you eventually have to go back to the original blueprints. You can't outbuild the 96 foundation forever.
Man, if we're talking about structural disasters, we have to pause on the Scream Halloween special. This was MTV's attempt at a made-for-TV movie to bridge the gap after Season 2. And honestly, it felt like the architect just gave up and started building a soap opera on a cruise ship. They took the Lakewood survivors and shipped them off to Shallow Grove Island for a standalone mystery that felt more like I Know What You Did Last Summer than Scream. And here's the biggest structural flaw: the no-kill rule. In a slasher, you have to cull the herd to keep the stakes high, but they were so precious with their main cast that none of the originals actually died. We had Kieran, the actual killer from Season 2, get his neck snapped in the opening, and then it was just a parade of red shirt characters we'd known for 5 minutes getting the axe. It completely drained the visceral weight out of the story.
It was a total technical letdown, Shane. You moved the setting to a spooky island with a local legend like Anna Hobbs, and the best you can give us is a copycat obsessed with Emma? It felt toothless. The kills were there, but they didn't matter because they didn't touch the core cast. It lacked that Wes Craven willingness to hurt the people we loved. It felt like a filler episode stretched into a 2-hour block just to fulfill a contract.
And psychologically, it was just messy. Emma's trauma was finally becoming interesting. She was retaking her identity. But then she gets thrown into another boyfriend is the killer plotline with that Tom Martin guy. It was a narrative loop that went nowhere. It turned the franchise into a who is Emma dating now soap opera instead of a psychological thriller. But the real kicker was the ending. They teased the return of Brandon James, the one piece of architecture fans actually wanted to see finished. And then, nothing. The show got rebooted into Resurrection. The Lakewood story was left on a permanent cliffhanger, and that special became the tombstone for that entire universe.
It's basically the black sheep of the Scream family.
It really is the black sheep of the family, isn't it? A half-finished renovation that just kind of sits there. But before we let the Lakewood era fade into the background, I have to put you guys on the spot one more time. Even with its flaws, what is the one thing you actually liked about the TV experiment? And, more importantly, What is the one structural change you would have made to save it?
I'll go first on the like, and it might surprise you. I actually love the expanded role of the horror nerd. Noah Foster wasn't just a Randy clone. Because he had 10 episodes a season, we got to see him actually investigate. His podcast, The Morgue, was a brilliant way to ground the meta-commentary in the 2000s. It felt like the architecture was finally acknowledging that the experts shouldn't just talk about movies. They should be the ones connecting the dots in real time. But the change? I would have connected it to the films. Even a small bridge, a mention of Sidney Prescott as a real-world survivor, or Gale Weathers' books being in the school library, would have given the foundation the support it needed. By making it a completely separate universe, they built a house on an island. If it had been Scream, The Woodsboro Murders, A New Generation, the stakes would have felt permanent from day one.
For me, the like was the Brandon James mask. I know, I'm a purist, but from a technical standpoint, a mask made of post-op surgical flesh is terrifying. It gave the visceral side of the show its own identity. It wasn't trying to be Ghostface, it was trying to be a local legend. It felt like something a real person would wear to haunt a small town. The change? Blood. Real blood. The show was on MTV, and you could feel the slasher light restrictions. I would have moved it to a streamer or a premium network where the technicality of the kills could actually match the movies. If you're going to do a slasher TV show, you can't have safe kills. I wanted to see the technical, mean-spirited traps that a long-form format allows for. Make it hurt or don't build it at all.
I'm with you both. I actually liked the Brooke Maddox character arc. She started as the Tatum archetype, the popular girl who should have died in episode 3. But she became the most resilient, psychologically complex survivor on the show. She was the heart of the Lakewood architecture. But my change? I would have killed a core 4 character in the Halloween special. If you want to stop it from feeling like a soap opera, you have to break the hearts of the audience. Killing Kieran was a cleanup move. Killing someone like Audrey or Noah would have been a statement. It would have told us that the rules still apply, even on a cruise ship.
Amen to that. No more safety nets. Which is the perfect mindset to have as we finally cross the threshold into 2022.
The fans are waiting. The elevated horror is ready. And Richie and Amber have some very specific opinions on how a sequel should be built.
The table is moving. Let's head to 2022. It's time for the requel.
The air is turning cold. I can feel it coming. In the damp of the night. Oh, I've been waiting for this moment all my life. Oh, Lord. Well, if you told me you were drowning, I would not lend a hand. I've seen your face in the camera lens before, my friend, but I don't know if you know who I am. Well, I was there in the shadows, and I saw what you did. I saw it with my own two hollow eyes. So you can wipe off the grin, I know where you've been. It's all been a pack of lies buried in the dirt. I can feel it coming in the air tonight. Oh Lord, I've been waiting for this moment for all my life. Oh Lord, can you feel it coming? The sky is a coffin, the moon is a nail. Oh Lord. Well, I remember the way the light left. How could I ever forget the first time, the last time we ever met in the basement? But I know the reason why you keep your silence up. No, you don't fool me. The hurt doesn't show, but the rot still grows. It's no stranger to you or me. The archives are waiting to wasn't real. I remember everything stays in the
– 25 years. That's how long it's been since Billy Loomis and Stu Macher changed Woodsboro forever. Tonight, we're stepping into the 2022 chapter, the movie that didn't even want to be called Scream 5. It wanted to be the requel. We're looking at a world where elevated horror is the new obsession, but the fans are more dangerous than ever. This is Scream 2022.
And the architecture of a requel is a very specific beast. It's not just a sequel, and it's not just a remake. It's a hybrid. You bring back the legacy characters, the legacyquels, to provide the foundation, but you build a brand new house on top of them for a new generation. The rules have shifted from don't have sex to don't fuck with the original. It's the ultimate meta-commentary on toxic fandom and the pressure to get it right for the people who live on 4chan and Reddit.
Viscerally, this movie is a sledgehammer. After the 90s and 2000s, the technicality of the gore has reached a whole new level. We're talking about stabs through the mouth, throat slitting in broad daylight, and a level of aggression that feels personal. This isn't just about scaring people, it's about a correction. I'm ready to dissect the anatomy of these kills.
We have to talk about Mindy Meeks Martin. As the niece of our patron saint Randy, she's the one holding the blueprints now. She laid it out perfectly. The new rules. You can't just repeat the past. You have to honor it while subverting it. The killers are always connected to the original murders. The first victim always has a circle of friends that the killer is a part of. The stakes. In a requel, nobody is safe, not even the legacy characters. In fact, their deaths are often used as fuel to make the new generation's story matter. It's a cynical bit of architecture, but it's what keeps the franchise standing.
And Dewey was the biggest casualty of those new rules. His death wasn't just a kill, it was a technical execution of the legacy itself. To have the man who survived so many stabbings finally go down because he went back for the headshot, that was a visceral gut punch that told us the requel wasn't playing games.
Psychologically, this film is obsessed with bloodlines and inheritance. She's the literal daughter of Billy Loomis. Her struggle isn't just with a killer in a mask, it's with the shadow of her father. Having visions of Skeet Ulrich? That's a deep dive into the fear that we are destined to become the monsters we come from. Then you have Richie and Amber. Their psychology is the most terrifying because it's the most real. They aren't motivated by trauma, they're motivated by ownership. They think they own the Stab franchise. Their motive is literally to fix the movies by providing a real-life source material. It's the ultimate psychological study of toxic entitlement.
Let's talk about the technical highlights. The opening, Tara Carpenter survives. That was a massive structural shift. The technicality of the broken leg and the stabs through the hands, it was mean, grounded, and painful. Wes Hicks. The slow burn kill in the kitchen, that was a direct homage to the director himself. The knife through the neck, clean, surgical, and absolutely silent. The final act, Amber Freeman being set on fire, that's a technical gore masterpiece. The parallel to her role in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is a fun bit of metacasting, but seeing her melt while still trying to attack was the most aggressive ending we've seen since Stu and the TV set.
Whoa, hold up. We can't just gloss over the ending without talking about the structural demolition of Richie Kirsch. If we're talking about Sam Carpenter and her inheritance, we have to talk about the moment she stopped being a victim and started being a specialist. From a story-building perspective, the architecture of that final showdown in Stu's old kitchen, which, by all means, was a brilliant narrative loop, completely flipped the script. Usually, the final girl survives by outsmarting the killer or getting a lucky shot. But Sam? She didn't just survive, She disassembled him. The moment she pulls out that knife and starts seeing Billy in the reflection, that's when the requel foundation really shifted. She stabs Richie 22 times. That's not a survival instinct, that's a legacy taking over. Then she wipes the blade just like her father did. It was the ultimate psychological payoff for the bloodline arc Chloe was talking about. It tells the audience that to beat the new version of the monster, you might have to let your own monster out of the cage. It was a brutal, necessary bit of character architecture that set the stage for everything she becomes in the next chapter.
Technically speaking, Shane, that was the most aggressive hero kill in the entire franchise. Richie thought he was the director, but he ended up being the prop. The visceral impact of Sam's attack was different from Sidney's. Sidney would kill to end it. Sam killed to destroy him. The throat slit at the end? That was a technical finishing move that proved the Carpenter sisters aren't playing by the old Woodsboro rules. They aren't just final girls, they're final killers.
And psychologically, it's terrifying. Sam is walking a razor-thin line. She's using her father's darkness as a weapon, but the architecture of her mind is under constant siege. Does she control the shadow, or does the shadow control her? Richie's death wasn't just a win for the survivors, it was a birth for a new kind of protagonist, one who doesn't just want to hide, one who is willing to be the person holding the knife. It leads perfectly into the mindset we see in New York, where the hunt becomes even more personal.
It was the ultimate correction. Richie wanted a masterpiece, and Sam gave him a tragedy in 22 parts. Now we've got a survivor who carries a literal ghost on her shoulder. How does that play out when you move the story from a small town to the most crowded city on Earth?
Before we pack our bags for the Big Apple, I need to know, now that the dust has settled on the 25th anniversary requel, what was the architectural high point for you? And on the flip side, if you were the one holding the pen, what's the one structural change you'd make to the foundation of Scream 2022?
I'll jump in on the best first. For me, it was the return to the Mocker House. From a story-building perspective, having the finale of the requel take place in the ruins of the original 1996 finale was a stroke of genius. It turned the setting into a character. Walking through those halls again, seeing the kitchen where Billy and Stu had their meltdown, felt like the architecture was coming full circle. It grounded the new characters in the original trauma, making the passing of the torch feel earned rather than forced. But the change? I would have kept the Amber as the killer reveal a mystery for longer. The architecture of the whodunit felt a little lopsided because Amber was so obviously suspicious from the jump. I would have used her more as a red herring hero, and maybe shifted the focus to someone like Mindy or even Chad, just to keep the audience's blueprints a bit more cluttered. When the reveal is that obvious, the technical tension of the unmasking loses a bit of its bite.
For me, the best was the brutality of the opening with Tara. Technically, it was a masterpiece. Having the first victim actually survive a sustained, high-impact assault changed the entire physics of the movie. It raised the stakes because it meant Ghostface wasn't just a shadow, he was a physical force that could be fought, even if he left you broken. The sound of that leg snapping? That's the kind of visceral detail that makes a slasher feel real. The change? Dewey's exit. Look, I get it, it's a requel. Someone has to die for the fuel. But the technical execution of his death felt like a rookie mistake for a guy who had survived 4 movies. If he was going to go out, I wanted it to be a tactical sacrifice. Have him take down a room full of traps or save the girls in a way that didn't involve him just standing too close to a corpse. It felt like the architect forced a pillar to fall just for the shock value, rather than letting it crumble under the weight of a heroic stand.
I'm with you on Dewey, Marcus. Psychologically, it was a hard pill to swallow. My favorite part, though, was the Sam and Billy hallucinations. I know it's polarizing, but seeing Sam navigate her literal inner monster added a layer of psychological horror the franchise hadn't really touched before. It moved the motive from external revenge to internal survival. But my change? I would have given the legacy characters more to do with the new generation earlier on. It felt like 2 different movies for the first hour, one about the kids and one about Sydney and Gail. I would have loved to see a psychological handoff, Maybe a scene where Sydney actually mentors Sam on how to handle the shadow before the blood started spilling. It would have made the final team-up feel like a unified structure instead of two houses joined by a hallway.
All right, let's talk about the behind-the-scenes architecture of the 2022 build, because the secrets in the walls are just as crazy as the movie itself. To keep the foundation from leaking, Radio Silence, the directors Tyler and Matt, went full Ghostface on the production. First off, to protect the requel reveal, they produced multiple fake scripts and alternate endings. It's a total callback to Scream 2. The twist, Melissa Barrera, Sam, has gone on record saying they didn't give her the real ending until late in the shoot. In her dummy script, the killers were actually both female, originally Amber and Mindy or Amber and Liv. She was so hyped for an all-female finale that she was actually a little disappointed when she found out Richie was involved. Secrecy. Most of the cast didn't know who the killers were during the early days of filming. They were all playing their scenes with a "maybe it's me" mindset, which adds to that psychological tension we were talking about. From a technical standpoint, this movie was a nightmare to shoot because it was filmed during the height of the pandemic. The opening. You know that brutal opening with Tara? Because of COVID delays, they had to film that over the first and last days of production. Jenna Ortega actually had a birthday in between. She was 17 in the first half of the attack and 18 in the second. The soundstage. Unlike the other films that were mostly on location, they built a massive recreation of the Mocker House on a soundstage at Screen Gem Studios. It gave them total control and allowed them to keep the set locked down so no one could see the blueprint from the outside. And we have to give a shout out to Roger L. Jackson. Even in 2022, they kept the tradition of Roger being on the phone live on set. When Tara or Sam are talking to Ghostface, they are actually talking to Roger, who is hidden somewhere on the studio lot with a microphone and a headset. He doesn't get the full script either. He only gets his scenes. So even the voice of the killer doesn't always know who he's working for until the end. The architect's Easter eggs were everywhere. When the characters toast to Wes at the party, it wasn't just Dylan Minette's character. The directors got original Scream alumni, like Drew Barrymore, Matthew Lillard, Jamie Kennedy, Henry Winkler, and Adam Brody, to record their voices for that toast. It was a massive, cross-generational passing of the torch. Vince's tattoos. Kyle Gallner's character Vince had a bunch of tattoos that were direct tributes to Wes Craven. One was the address from A Nightmare on Elm Street, 1428, on his knuckles. The Kirby leak. If you look closely at the YouTube screen while Richie is watching stab videos, there's a thumbnail for an interview with Woodsboro survivor Kirby Reed. It was the first structural hint that Kirby's foundation was still standing after Scream 4.
That's some solid technical trivia, Shane. It explains why the movie feels so tight. It was built under pressure. But that pandemic isolation really served the visceral side. It made the kills feel even more claustrophobic and mean.
And psychologically, the fake scripts were genius. It meant the actors were as paranoid as the characters. It turned the set into a real-life whodunit.
Actually, if we're talking about the final blueprint of the 2022 film, we'd be doing a disservice to the forensic audit if we didn't mention the Matthew Lillard mystery. There is a huge architectural debate about a secret cameo. In the scene where the new cast is at the party, there's a guy in the background wearing a chrome Ghostface mask. For years, fans have speculated that was actually Matthew Lillard. While the directors eventually confirmed he technically has a voice cameo, he's the voice of the flamethrower Ghostface in the Stab 8 clip, the Stu is alive theorists are still convinced he's lurking in the foundation somewhere. It's a great example of how the architect leaves a ghost door open for future expansions.
And on the technical side, I've got one more for you. The red herring of the red right hand. In the original films, Nick Cave's red right hand was the musical signature of the franchise. In Scream 2022, the directors purposefully waited until the very end to play it. They used the absence of that song to keep the audience feeling like the old house was gone, only to drop it during the credits as a technical confirmation that the legacy had been successfully rebooted. It's a subtle bit of sound design that acts like a finishing coat of paint.
I have to mention the Dewey and Gale dynamic. A lot of people don't realize that David Arquette and Courtney Cox hadn't worked together in a decade since their real-life divorce. The palpable tension and sadness in those scenes wasn't just acting. It was two people who had built a real-life foundation together for 20 years. It's why those scenes feel so heavy. The blueprint of their fictional relationship was resting on the rubble of their real one. It's arguably the most real moment in the entire franchise.
That's a heavy pillar to end on, Chloe, but it's the truth. The Scream architecture is built on blood, meta-commentary, and very real history.
Absolutely.
So, that's the 2022 ledger. We've covered the toxic fans, the legacy kills, the secret scripts, and the return to the Mocker House. The table is finally clear, which means it's time to head to the Port Authority.
Yep. Next stop, New York City, the bodega, the subway, and the most aggressive Ghostface we've ever seen. Let's get into Scream 6.
I'm ready. I want to talk about Mindy on that subway. Talk about a technical nightmare for someone who knows the rules.
Let's do it.
Take a little walk to the edge of town. Now spread your wings and fly. Don't the lights of the city look so damn pretty when you're flying so high? It's hard to know about the down below. Streets, babe, are swimming deep in blood. It seems to make a grown man cry. You really wanna know what's wrong with this land? You scratch your head with your red right hand. See, everyone's a lie, babe, and that's the truth. I said everyone's a lie, babe, and I got the proof. You got a new boy, you feel you're in with a chance. You think you're in his arms, but you're in his hands. But still, he seems so cute and true and groovy. Get that boy up on the stand and watch him raise his red right hand. Move your hips, babe, move your thighs. Use your lips, babe, conceal his prize. He's tracing a tiny finger down your spine. He's leaving behind a thin red line. Oh, don't get so sad when it all comes down so heavy. A low wind moans across the land as he breaks at your chest with his red right hand. I'm talking about blood, babe. It's in your veins, your mommy and daddy. They got the same. You're under the mirror day after day. You see a pretty face crumbling away as you become your mom and daddy. Scream once, scream twice, now scream again. Cover that face with your red with your red right here.
We've left the small-town secrets of Woodsboro in the rearview mirror. It's 2023, and the core four, Sam, Tara, Mindy, and Chad, have traded the suburbs for the skyscrapers. Tonight, we're dissecting Scream 6. This isn't just a sequel, it's a full-scale invasion of the Big Apple. The rules have changed, the city is indifferent, and Ghostface is no longer just a slasher. He's an urban predator.
The architecture of Scream 6 is a massive departure. Moving from a town where everyone knows your name to a city where nobody cares if you scream is a brilliant structural shift. The requel era is over. We're in the expansion phase. The blueprints this time aren't just limited to one house. They span the entire MTA, high-rise apartments, and even a secret shrine to the past. It's about the scale of the hunt and the anonymity of the concrete jungle.
And viscerally, this is arguably the most aggressive Ghostface in the entire ledger. This killer isn't hiding in the shadows. He's walking into bodegas with a shotgun. He's taking the technicality of the chase to the next level, using the environment of New York as a weapon. I'm ready to talk about the mean streak in this one, because the gore isn't just bloody, it's high velocity.
We have to start with the structural bait and switch. We get the classic phone call with Laura Crane, Samara Weaving. The kill happens, and then the killer takes off the mask. For the first 5 minutes, the architect makes us think we're watching a movie from the killer's perspective. It's a complete subversion of the whodunit until the real Ghostface shows up to take out the copycats. It tells the audience immediately, the rules you just learned in 2022, throw them out. This is a different kind of game.
That kill in the alley was a technical statement. When the real Ghostface appears and tells the copycat, "Who gives a fuck about movies?" That was the visceral pivot. This killer isn't a fan, he's a force of nature.
This film is about found family versus bloodline. The core four have built a mental fortress to survive their trauma. They aren't just friends, they're a unit. But New York tests that. Sam is still wrestling with the ghost of Billy Loomis, but now it's more tactical. She's starting to realize that her father's darkness isn't just a curse, it's a survival mechanism. The psychology here is, how much of your soul are you willing to trade to keep your family alive in a city that wants to swallow you whole?
Let's talk shop on the new technical environments. The bodega, this is the standout sequence. Ghostface picking up a shotgun, that was a technical WTF moment for the fans. It proved he's adaptable. He's not a purist, he's a hunter using whatever tools are available. The apartment ladder, one of the most claustrophobic technical set pieces in the series. The physics of that ladder, the height, and the tension of Anika's slow crawl, that was a visceral masterclass in high-stakes survival.
And we have to talk about the Ghostface Shrine. From a story-building perspective, it's the ultimate architectural museum of the franchise. Having every mask, every outfit, and even the original TV set that killed Stu Macher in one room, it's the architect's dream, and a psychological nightmare for the survivors.
It was a technical treasure trove. Seeing the damaged masks from the previous films gave it a real sense of history. It made the threat feel like it was a century old, even though it's only been 27 years.
But let's be real. The city itself was the biggest character. The subway scene? That was a psychological trap. Being surrounded by 100 ghost faces and not knowing which one is real is the ultimate urban nightmare.
So, the core four survived the subway, the shrine, and the shotgun. But the motive behind this one was a return to a very familiar architecture.
Revenge. The oldest motive in the book, but with a New York City budget.
All right, let's peel back the wallpaper on the Bailey Kirsch clan. Psychologically, this is a completely different architecture than we've seen in the past. Usually, Ghostface is a loner or a duo bound by a secret or a shared grudge. But in Scream 6, we're looking at the radicalized nuclear family. Wayne Bailey is the most dangerous kind of architect, the indulgent parent. He didn't just know about Richie's obsession, he funded it. He used his position as a detective to steal evidence and build that shrine. Psychologically, he's a man who has completely abdicated his moral compass to appease his son's psychopathy. He doesn't see Richie as a killer, he sees him as a misunderstood visionary. His grief isn't about loss, it's about vindicating the monster. By roping in his other children, he's not just getting revenge, he's creating a cult of memory. Then you have Quinn and Ethan, and this is where it gets really dark. Quinn is the protector. She sees herself as the middle child who needed to step up after the star of the family was taken out. Her anger is driven by a twisted sense of loyalty. She's willing to live a lie, fake her own death, and butcher her roommates because, in her mind, the Carpenter sisters stole the heart of her family. Ethan is the outsider trying to earn his seat at the table. He's the youngest, likely always in Richie's shadow. Participating in these murders is his way of finally belonging to the family business. It's a groupthink mentality where the family unit becomes a closed loop. They've radicalized each other to the point where Sam and Tara aren't even people to them. They're just debt that needs to be collected. What makes them unique is the hierarchy. Usually, Ghostface partners eventually turn on each other. Think Billy and Stu or Jill and Charlie. But the Baileys? They actually like each other. They work with a terrifying professional efficiency because they have the ultimate bond, blood. They aren't trying to outshine each other, they're trying to honor a legacy. It's the first time the killers have had a healthy, if you can call it that, support system, which makes their violence feel colder and more calculated.
It's a collective psychosis, Chloe. They've built a reality where Richie is the hero. It's a perfect mirror to the toxic fandom we saw in 2022, but instead of being fueled by Reddit threads, it's fueled by Sunday dinners. It's the ultimate architectural failure of the family unit.
And that's why the visceral payoff at the end, where Sam puts on her father's mask and uses Wayne's own phone to taunt him, was so technically satisfying. She didn't just kill them, she broke the family's legend by becoming the thing they feared most.
Exactly. She used their own psychological blueprint against them. But man, to think a dad would help his kids set up a murder shrine as a hobby? That's the real horror story.
All right, before we move on, we have to talk about the Ghost in the Machine of Scream 6. While the movie looks like a slick New York blockbuster, the technical blueprints were actually a chaotic mess of pivoting due to real-world issues. First off, the most meta part of this movie isn't the script, it's the location. Despite all those shots of the Port Authority and bodegas, the movie was almost entirely filmed in Montreal, Canada. The challenge. To make Montreal look like NYC, they had to recreate entire subway stations on sound stages. They couldn't use real subway cars because they were too heavy for the studio floors, so they built a 1-to-1 scale replica. The Easter egg problem. Because they were filming in Canada, almost every background NYC sign is actually covering up a French sign. It's a fun technical game for fans to spot the Canadian fingerprints on the concrete jungle. The Sidney Prescott paywall. We can't ignore the elephant in the room, the Neve Campbell pay dispute. For the first time in 27 years, the franchise architect, Sidney Prescott, was absent. The script had to be completely overhauled at the last minute. In the original blueprints, Sidney had a much larger role alongside Gale. When she dropped out, the story building had to pivot to focus entirely on the core four. From a plot analysis standpoint, many fans think this actually helped the movie. It forced the new generation to stand on their own feet without Sidney coming in to save the day at the 11th hour. It proved the Carpenter bloodline could carry the house alone. Then there's the Kirby factor. Hayden Panettiere's return was the ultimate ghost door opening. After that YouTube Easter egg in Scream 2022 set the internet on fire, the directors reached out to Hayden. Interestingly, she actually called them first. She told them she wanted in, and they built the FBI specialist role specifically for her. It was a masterclass in fan service that actually served the plot. Kirby acted as the bridge between the Woodsboro remake era and the New York era. Did it work? Psychologically, it was a hit. Fans loved seeing her survived and thriving. But technically, it introduced some major logic leaks. The idea that she became an FBI agent in just a few years while dealing with massive trauma and then potentially being fired for being unstable felt a bit rushed. But in a movie with a Ghostface shrine, we're already playing with a heightened reality. And let's talk about that final act. This is where my architect brain starts to itch. The Quinn reveal. How did a detective and his daughter fake a crime scene so well that even the Core 4, who just saw her get killed, didn't notice it was a dummy? The plot armor. This movie has some of the highest survival rates in the series. Chad Meeks Martin getting stabbed by 2 Ghostfaces simultaneously and still making it to the ambulance? That's some thick plot armor. It felt like the technicality of the slasher was being traded for action hero logic.
I'm with you on the armor, Shane. Chad is basically the human pincushion at this point. Viscerally, I wanted those stabs to mean more. But I have to give it to them. The technical execution of the bodega shotgun and the subway sequence were top tier. They used the city's unique architecture to create scares we've never seen in the franchise before.
And psychologically, Kirby's return was a stroke of genius. It gave Sam someone to talk to who had actually been through the remake Meat Grinder. It grounded the survivors in a way that made the found family feel even stronger.
It was a bold, messy, high-energy build. It proved Scream could survive the city, survive the loss of its lead, and still draw a massive crowd.
So the shrine is burned, the Baileys are dead, and the Core 4 are still standing. But the architect isn't done yet. All right, let's open up the forensic kit and look at the actual anatomy of the carnage in New York. If Scream 2022 was a return to form, Scream 6 is a technical escalation. We aren't just looking at slasher tropes anymore, we're looking at high-velocity aggression. The technicality of the kills and the way Ghostface uses the environment is a total shift from the suburbs. This is the sequence everyone talks about, and for good reason. From a visceral perspective, it changes the physics of Ghostface. The violence. We see Ghostface kill 3 people in quick succession. He stabs a customer multiple times in the stomach, takes out another with a clean neck slice, and then, the big technical pivot, he picks up a pump-action shotgun. The kill. He doesn't just shoot the clerk, he stabs him first and then fires. It's a brutal, noisy execution that shatters the stealth blueprint of the character. Behind the scenes. The directors, Tyler and Matt, wanted this scene to prove that this Ghostface wasn't a fanboy. He's a hunter. Using a gun in a Scream movie is usually a final act reveal, but putting it in the first 20 minutes was a technical statement. The rules have changed. The latter scene is arguably the most Scream sequence in the city. It's a combination of a real location in Montreal and a stage build. Anika's death is a visceral gut punch. She's already been disemboweled. Ethan literally sliced her stomach open in the apartment, and then she has to crawl across a horizontal ladder stories above the ground. When Ghostface starts shaking that ladder, the camera angles are designed to avoid impossible shots. They used a construction crane to lift the camera onto a real roof to get those overhead wide shots. The sound of her head hitting the dumpster at the bottom, that's a technical crunch that sticks with you. It's one of the few falling deaths in the franchise, and it's arguably the meanest. The subway scene was a handshake between every department: costume, set design, and choreography. The technicality of the lighting is what makes this work. The flickering lights in the R62A subway car, which was a 1-to-1 scale replica built on a stage, allowed Ghostface to teleport. You have Mindy surrounded by hundreds of people in Ghostface masks. The scare isn't just the jump, it's the anonymity. The technical challenge was making it look like a crowded NYC train while filming in Canada. Mindy getting stabbed in the gut while being gagged, and the crowd not even noticing, is the ultimate urban nightmare. It's the bystander effect turned into a technical set piece. The gore in the shrine is a celebration of the franchise's history. The Ethan kill. This was a technical meta moment. Tara stabs him in the mouth, a clean, visceral puncture, and then Kirby drops the original TV set from 1996 on his head. It was the architect's way of finally confirming that, yes, a TV can kill you. Sam Carpenter's attack on Detective Bailey is the most aggressive hero kill in the series. She stabs him 29 times. From a forensic perspective, that is overkill in its purest form. When she finishes him with the knife to the eye, that's the technical finishing move that proves she's inherited the Loomis edge.
It's a brutal ledger, Marcus. The scale is bigger, the weapons are louder, and the city makes everything feel more exposed. It's like the architect decided to take the roof off the house and let the storm in.
And the bystander effect on that subway is what haunts me. To be dying in a crowd and no one sees you because they think it's content or a costume, that's the real gore of the modern world.
Exactly. It was a technical triumph for the Core Four. But as the dust settles on New York, we have to look at the blueprints for what's next.
The NYC chapter really was a gauntlet. It felt like the architecture was designed specifically to isolate the characters while they were surrounded by millions of people. But before we fold up the maps of Manhattan, I need to put you both on the spot. We've seen the Core Four go from survivors to warriors. So, look at the blueprints for Scream 6. What was the architectural high point for you? And if you were the lead contractor, what is the one structural change you'd make to this urban nightmare?
For me, the best has to be the Ghostface Shrine. From a story-building perspective, it's the ultimate payoff for 27 years of history. It wasn't just a set, it was a psychological weapon. Seeing the original Mocker TV, the Billy Loomis robe, and the wall of masks turned the entire franchise into a living, breathing museum. It was the perfect way to ground a New York story in Woodsboro roots without physically leaving the city. It felt like the architect finally built a dedicated archive for the stab generation. But the change? I would have retained the original Cult of Ghostface motive. Early rumors and drafts suggested the shrine was part of a larger network of killers, not just one family. While the Bailey revenge plot worked, I think the architecture of the film was screaming for a broader conspiracy. Making it a family vendetta felt a little small for a movie that felt so big. I wanted the logic leak to be a flood. I wanted to see that the franchise had truly become a religion for the dark corners of the internet.
The best for me was the bodega sequence, obviously. Technically and viscerally, it's a 10 out of 10. It broke the slasher blueprint in the best way possible. By having Ghostface use a shotgun and move with that level of terrifying speed in a public space, it told the audience that nowhere is safe. It wasn't about the rules anymore. It was about pure technical efficiency. It's the most modern the killer has ever felt. The change? The plot armor on the Core Four. I'm looking at you, Chad Meeks Martin. Technically, after being stabbed by two killers at the same time in the shrine, there is no way he's giving a thumbs up on a gurney 10 minutes later. It felt like the visceral consequences were being traded for action movie tropes. To save the architecture, I would have killed off one of the Core Four in the finale, likely Chad or Mindy. If the legacy characters can die, the new blood needs to feel the same level of risk. Without a major casualty, the house starts to feel a bit too sturdy, and in horror, you want the walls to feel like they could collapse at any second.
I completely agree, Marcus. The survival rate in NYC was a bit too high for my psychological comfort. My best was the subway sequence. It was the ultimate study in urban paranoia. The lighting, the costumes, the claustrophobia. It was a technical masterpiece that utilized the New York setting perfectly. But my change? I would have integrated Gale Weathers more into the finale. Her fight scene in the apartment was incredible, maybe her best technical sequence in the whole series, but then she just disappears into a hospital bed. I wanted to see the architect of the story stand side by side with the new blood in that theater. It felt like a missed opportunity to have Gale and Kirby, the two most iconic survivors outside of Sydney, really share the blueprints for a final stand.
It was a wild ride. The Big Apple certainly left its mark.
even if some of the wounds healed a little too fast.
So the shrine is ashes, the Baileys are in the morgue, and Sam has her father's mask in her pocket. But the story isn't over.
All right, let's close the ledger on New York. Scream 6 was a high-octane demolition of the slasher status quo. It took the core four and proved that even without Sidney Prescott, the house could hold. It was a massive technical victory, a box office monster, and it left us with Sam Carpenter walking into the sunset with her father's mask, a psychological ticking time bomb. The blueprint was set for a trilogy closer that would change everything.
But then, the real world decided to crash the party. And this is where the architecture doesn't just crack, it implodes.
We're entering the era of Scream 7, 2026. And man, if you thought the stab fans in the movies were toxic, the real-life drama behind this film makes Richie and Amber look like amateurs. Let's get into it.
Step on the stairs, is he outside already in? I can't tell what is where. My heart's on drum, beating out of time. A frantic wild tattoo. He watching me from somewhere, and I'm the one who's here. Every shadow is a shape, every creak is a sound. I can't breathe. Ghostly grin and grin. He's in the closet, under the bed, behind the bedroom door. I'm just a character in his movie, a victim he's looking for.
First things first, tell us about the production hell this movie went through just to exist, Shane. Because honestly, the off-screen drama for Scream 7 was more of a bloodbath than anything the killers did in the previous 6 movies. It felt like the entire house was being demolished while the actors were still inside.
You're not kidding, Chloe. From an architectural standpoint, Scream 7 is a ship of Theseus. By the time it hit theaters this year, almost every original board and nail had been replaced. It started as the third act of the Carpenter trilogy, and it ended as a legacy rescue mission. Let's look at the wreckage. The Melissa Barrera firing. In late 2023, the foundation was ripped out. Spyglass fired Melissa Barrera, Sam Carpenter, over social media posts regarding the Israel-Palestine conflict. It wasn't just losing a lead, it was losing the central psychological arc the requel era was built on. From a story-building perspective, Sam Carpenter was the most important pillar the series had seen since Sidney Prescott. To have her removed so abruptly didn't just change the script, it rendered the entire foundation of the 2022 and 2023 films essentially irrelevant. In November 2023, Spyglass Media Group fired Melissa following a series of social media posts she made regarding the Israel-Hamas war. Spyglass issued a statement claiming her posts crossed a line into anti-Semitism and hate speech. Melissa and her supporters maintained that she was simply advocating for human rights and a ceasefire. This created a massive PR sinkhole. The fan base, which had spent 2 years becoming obsessed with the Carpenter sisters, was suddenly split. A massive boycott movement, #BoycottScream7, started trending immediately, putting the brand's architecture under a level of scrutiny it had never faced. Within 24 hours of Melissa being fired, the other pillar fell. Jenna Ortega officially exited, citing scheduling conflicts with Wednesday, but the industry blueprints suggest it was a show of solidarity. Suddenly, the core four were the core two. The reality is that most industry analysts see this as a tactical withdrawal. Losing Sam was bad. Losing Jenna Ortega, who had become a global megastar since Scream 2022, was the architectural equivalent of losing the load-bearing walls. Without the sisters, there was no core four, and without the core four, Scream 7 had no story. For months, the production was a literal ghost site. You had a director, Christopher Landon, who had signed on to direct a Carpenter movie, and suddenly he was left with no lead actors and a script that was now a stack of blank paper. When he eventually walked away, he famously called it a nightmare, and you could see why. The architect had the tools, but the studio had burned down the lot. The return of Kevin Williamson. In a desperate bid to save the brand, Spyglass went back to the original architect. Kevin Williamson, who hadn't written a Scream movie since Part 4 or directed a film since the 90s, was convinced to take the director's chair. They finally opened the vault for Neve Campbell. After the public backlash of her absence in Scream 6, the studio paid her what she was worth to bring Sidney Prescott back as the primary protagonist. They had to scrap the entire Sam/Tara script and rebuild a Sidney-centric story from scratch in record time.
The traumatic impact on some of the fans were devastating. Sam Carpenter represented a new kind of final girl, someone with a mental illness and a dark legacy who was choosing to be a hero. To have that representation snatched away over a real-world political dispute felt like a betrayal of the safe space the movies had built. The franchise, which always prided itself on being meta and socially aware, suddenly felt very corporate and rigid.
All right, let's talk about the cold open of Scream 7, 2026. This sequence is the ultimate case study in nostalgia as a weapon. It takes us right back to where it all began, the Mocker House, but with a cynical, modern twist that feels like a direct response to the production hell Shane was talking about. It's meta, it's mean, and it's arguably the most divisive opening since the inception start of Scream 4. Let's break it down.
The setup. The Stab Airbnb. From an architectural standpoint, the concept is brilliant. The original Stu Mocker house has been turned into a macabre Airbnb. It's decorated with stab posters, Ghostface mannequins, and, this is the visceral kicker, chalk outlines on the floor where the 1996 victims actually fell. It satirizes how we monetize tragedy, which is classic Kevin Williamson.
The good. Jimmy Tatro steals the show.
The best part of this opening is the casting of Jimmy Tatro as Scott. He plays the stab fanboy with a technical perfection that is both hilarious and annoying. He's giddy, taking selfies in a murder house, while his girlfriend Madison, Michelle Randolph, is clearly over it. There's a classic horror trivia phone call that turns out to be an automated recording set up by the homeowners to scare guests. It's a great technical subversion that makes the audience lower their guard right before the real Ghostface shows up.
The bad. The disposable victims.
Here's the structural problem. Scott and Madison have zero connection to Sydney or the Carpenter legacy. After the Core 4 era, where the opening kills, like Tara in 22, actually mattered to the plot, going back to two random fans getting butchered feels like a bit of a step backward. It's a self-contained gag that doesn't push the narrative forward until later in the film. It feels like the architect was playing it safe by using a standard blueprint.
The ugly. The visceral execution.
This is where it gets mean. Ghostface doesn't just kill them, he incinerates the history. The kill. Scott is stabbed while distracted by what he thinks is a mannequin. But Madison's death is the one people are talking about. After a brutal chase through the house, Ghostface catches her and literally sets the house on fire with her inside. Seeing the iconic Mocker house, the foundation of the entire franchise, burned to the ground in the first 10 minutes is a huge statement. It's the new architect, Williamson, saying, "The old house is gone, we're moving on." But viscerally, seeing that landmark go up in flames felt like a gut punch to the purists.
It's a reset button. By burning down the site of the original trauma, the movie is trying to tell us that Sydney can never go back to her roots. But it also feels a bit like the studio was trying to burn away the drama of the Melissa Barrera firing by literally destroying the most famous set in the series. It's a scorched earth policy, both literally and figuratively.
It's a 10 out of 10 for spectacle, but a 3 out of 10 for emotional weight.
All right, we've cleared the smoke from the Mocker house. Now we're in Pine Grove, Indiana, and the architecture of Sydney's new life is, on the surface, flawless. She's got the coffee house, she's got the husband, and she's got a teenage daughter named after her fallen best friend. But psychologically, the walls are closing in. Sydney has turned her life into a fortress, and her daughter Tatum is the one trapped inside the blueprints.
Exactly. And that leads us straight into the mirror recreation that had everyone in the theater whispering. Tatum is in her room, and her boyfriend, Ben, sneaks in through the window. It is a literal frame-by-frame echo of Billy Loomis in '96. It's a brilliant technical move. It immediately tells the audience that the past isn't just a memory, it's a template. It makes you instantly distrust Ben because we've seen this blueprint before. And then they hit us with the brown leather jacket from Scream 2 and that college theater callback. It's not just fan service, it's a technical suit of armor for Sydney. It reminds us that she's a survivor of every era of this franchise.
But while Sydney is looking at the past, the present is getting viscerally messy. Let's talk about Carl Gibbs. Carl was the best fake-out we've had in years. He's that creepy guy at the coffee shop, the mental patient with the Tory spelling obsession. Viscerally, he's a technical classic killer, silent, staring, hiding in the attic. The fact that Gail literally runs him over with her car before the third act even begins, that was a technical shock to the system. It unmasked a Ghostface before the finale, which is a massive structural shift for the franchise.
The real horror in the first half isn't the knife. It's the Tatum and Sydney relationship. The conflict. Tatum has a rough relationship with her mother because she's tired of being a legend's daughter. She resents the overprotection. She's participating in a school play, a direct nod to Scream 2, and the teacher is comparing her to Sydney. Tatum wants to be her own person, but the Ghostface legacy won't let her. That resentment is what makes her vulnerable. It's why she trusts her friends Chloe and Lucas, not realizing they're just functional furniture for the slaughter.
Then we get that crazy-ass Gail, Chad, and Mindy introduction. Seeing Gail roll into town with the Meeks twins in the back seat was like a crossover event.
Gail is the bridge. She's the one who realizes that a Ghostface killing doesn't count if Sidney Prescott isn't there. She brings the New York experience to Sidney's doorstep. Mindy is still the architect of the rules, but Gail is the one fueled by the old rage. It's a chaotic, high-energy trio that shakes up the quiet Pine Grove foundation.
Chad is holding a camera and waiting to get stabbed. Again. It literally feels like they are trying to make Mindy the new Randy and Chad the new Dewey.
All right, let's talk about the blueprints of a disaster turned into a homecoming. To understand Scream 7, you have to understand the production hell that acted as the real-life slasher. After the firing of Melissa Barrera and the exit of Jenna Ortega, the Carpenter trilogy house was burned to the ground. Kevin Williamson stepped in to rebuild from the ashes, and his strategy was aggressive nostalgia. That opening scene where Tatum's boyfriend sneaks through the window? That's a frame-by-frame reconstruction of Billy Loomis in '96. It's fun and good. It tells the audience we're back in the original architect's hands.
Bringing back the brown leather jacket from Scream 2 and the college theater callback wasn't just fan service. It was a technical statement that Sidney's history is her armor.
And mentions of the NYC Ghostface killings to Sidney were a vital, good callback. It proved that even though the studio fired the cast, the architect wasn't going to pretend those structural events didn't happen.
The introduction of crazy-ass Gail, Chad, and Mindy was a chaotic bridge. It brought the new rules of the Core Four into the old legacy of Pine Grove. It solidified the rule: a Ghostface killing doesn't count if Sidney Prescott isn't there.
Psychologically, this film is a fascinating look at the prison of protection. Sidney has spent decades building a fortress, but she didn't realize she was building a cage for her daughter, Tatum. Tatum and Sidney have a rough relationship because Tatum resents her mother's trauma. She doesn't want to be a legacy, she wants to be a teenager. Seeing her mother's fear as an anchor rather than a shield was the psychological logic leak of the film. That final line, "Are you okay?" / "I'm Sidney fucking Prescott's daughter," is the ultimate psychological payoff. It's the moment Tatum stops resenting the bloodline and starts wielding it. Gail Weathers in this movie is crazy-ass for a reason. She's addicted to the story. Her presence forces Sidney out of her domestic, fake reality and back into the truth of the hunt. It's a toxic, necessary relationship that drives the second act.
Let's get into the gore and the red herrings. Viscerally, this felt like a classic Williamson-Craven collaboration. The leaves blowing around during the final act gave it that deep Nightmare on Elm Street vibe. It moved the violence into a fever dream territory. The Hannah kill. This was amazing. The technicality of her being trapped before being gutted. The execution while Sidney was just seconds away. It was a masterclass in tension. It was one of the meanest, most precise kills since the original opening. The fake herring. Carl was the best red herring we've had in years. The technicality of his staring and the way he was positioned in the coffee shop was 10 out of 10 distraction architecture. The ballistic finale. The technical mic drop of the movie. Sidney doesn't play the monologue game anymore. She shot her fucking face off. No one-liners, just high-caliber finality. It was a visceral confirmation that Sidney Prescott is done being a victim.
It's a house built on controversy and what-ifs, but Scream 7, 2026, proved that as long as the foundation is Sidney Prescott, the house will stand.
All right, let's get into the psychological blueprint of the killers in Scream 7, because this wasn't just another stab fanatic or a revenge-seeking relative. This was something much more ridiculous. We're talking about the deep-fake architect. This was brilliant and cruel. Jessica and Marco didn't just want to kill, they wanted a human shield. By gaslighting and manipulating Carl, a psych patient who was already obsessed with the franchise's history, they created a live-action red herring. They fed Carl's delusions, essentially programming him to be the one Sidney and Mark focused on. While the forensic audit was busy tracking the obvious psycho, Jessica and Marco were operating in the blind spots. Using Carl as cannon fodder meant they had a fall guy ready to take the bullet, or car, while they finished the job. Jessica is the psychological mirror of what a final girl looks like in 2026. She's polished, she's helpful, and she's a sociopath. Marco, the orderly, he knew exactly how to trigger Carl, and more importantly, he knew the psychological cracks in Sydney's new life. He was the one who planned the setup of Carl in the attic, using his knowledge of the house's layout and Sydney's schedule to stay invisible. They were successful because they stayed boring. No one suspects the orderly. You only see one time before the reveal or the overachieving neighbor when there's a crazy psych patient roaming the streets. They got sloppy once Carl was dead. They thought the distraction phase was over and they could just waltz into the finale. By the time Sydney and Tatum shot Jessica's fucking face off, the cannon fodder plan had backfired. They tried to use a broken man to hide their tracks, but all they did was sharpen Sydney's instincts. That technical pivot with Carl was neat. It's the first time we've seen Ghostface use a proxy so effectively. Viscerally, AI made the movie feel more like a chess match than a typical slasher.
It was a cold, calculated build. Jessica and Marco were the most modern architects yet. They didn't care about the stab movies. They cared about the optics of survival. Too bad for them, Sidney Prescott is the one who wrote the book on how to survive the slasher twist.
All right, we've scrubbed the crime scene, analyzed the trauma, and finally got the ledger straight on the Jessica/Marco/Carl dynamic. But before we pack up Scream 7, I need to get into your heads. We've seen the franchise survive a literal, real-world implosion to give us this mother-daughter finale. So, boys, look at the blueprints for Scream 7. What was the architectural high point that made the production hell worth it? And if you were the lead contractor, what is the one structural change you'd make to this legacy?
For me, the high point was the atmospheric pivot. For years, we've been in high-gloss, metamodern environments, sunny Woodsboro or neon-lit New York. But the way Kevin Williamson brought back that deep, autumn chill, leaves blowing in the wind vibe was a masterstroke. It felt like a Nightmare on Elm Street crossover in the best way possible. Architecturally, it moved the franchise from a slasher to a gothic slasher. It made the house feel haunted even before the first drop of blood hit the floor. But the change? I'm still hung up on the Stu Macher deepfake tease. Marco uses AI-generated videos of Stu to taunt Sydney. While it was a cool technical nod to modern tech, I think it was a missed architectural opportunity. If you're going to invoke the ghost of the original house, you should have used it to bridge the gap between Jessica's narcissistic motive and the original 1996 trauma more effectively. It felt like a teaser that didn't have a solid foundation in the final reveal.
The best for me was the Carl Gambit. Viscerally and technically, using a psych patient as cannon fodder is the most brilliant thing a Ghostface has ever done. It made the forensic audit part of my brain work overtime. We spent the whole movie looking at the obvious threat while the real killers were acting as our guides. It was a technical bait and switch that actually rewarded the audience for paying attention to the rules. The change? The superhero Gale Weathers. Don't get me wrong, I love crazy-ass Gale, but her running over Carl with a car and then essentially doing a tactical slide into the finale felt a bit much. I would have grounded her more. I wanted to see the Gale who is struggling to keep up with the new rules, not a Gale who is basically an action hero. If she had been more vulnerable, the psychological stakes for Sydney would have felt even higher.
I'm with you on Gale, Marcus. I love her, but she's starting to feel indestructible. My best was the final line. That "I'm Sydney fucking Prescott's daughter" moment was the perfect completion of the Tatum arc. It took all that resentment we saw in the first half and turned into a weapon. It was the most satisfying psychological payoff in the entire trilogy. But my change? The Hannah kill should have been the finale's catalyst. It was such a high-level technical kill that I felt the movie dipped slightly in tension right after. I would have moved that sequence closer to the third act to keep that "no one is safe" energy at a fever pitch. Hannah could have been a bigger grief by surviving more of the film. We already knew the killers were capable of anything. I wanted that fear to be fresher when Sydney pulled the trigger.
It was a wild, messy, beautiful build. Scream 7 proved that even when the house is on fire, the Prescott family knows how to find the exit. We've dissected the blueprints from 1996 to 2026. We've tracked the bloodlines, the requels, the production meltdowns, and the urban expansions. Now, it's time for the final walkthrough. After 30 years, where does the Scream franchise actually stand in the architecture of horror history? For me, the brilliance of Scream is its foundational integrity. Most horror franchises eventually lose their minds. They go to space, they become dreams, or they just become unrecognizable. But Scream has stayed true to its core blueprint, the human element. Every single entry is a reflection of the era it was built in. The 90s gave us the deconstruction of the slasher, the 2000s gave us the commentary on fame, and the 2020s gave us the forensic look at toxic fandom and legacy trauma. Even when the production hell of Scream 7 threatened to demolish the house, the franchise proved its resilience because it's built on characters we actually care about. Sydney, Gale, Dewey, and now Tatum and the core four, they aren't just final girls and survivors, they are the load-bearing walls of the entire genre. It is, without question, the most consistent architecture in horror.
Viscerally, Scream is the gold standard for anatomical terror. It's easy to make a monster, but it's hard to make a human in a costume terrifying. The franchise succeeded because it kept the stakes grounded. When someone gets stabbed in a Scream movie, it's not just a jump scare, it's a technical failure of safety. From the surgical precision of the Hannah kill in 7 to the high-velocity aggression of the bodega shotgun in 6, the series has constantly evolved its kill language without losing its identity. It proved that you don't need supernatural powers to be a force of nature. You just need a mask, a voice changer, and a grudge. It's the most honest horror franchise because the monster could be the person sitting next to you. That is the ultimate visceral high.
Psychologically, Scream is a study in survival as a lifestyle. It's the only franchise that actually lets its characters grow through their trauma. We didn't just see Sidney Prescott survive once. We saw her build a life, a family, and a fortress out of the rubble of her past. The series is a mirror to our own obsession with true crime and the rules of entertainment. It's a loop that we, the audience, are part of. By the time we reached Scream 7, the psychology moved from who is the killer to how do we break the cycle. The relationship between Sydney and Tatum is the perfect closing bracket for the psychological arc that started with Sydney and Maureen. It's about the burden of the legacy and the strength it takes to finally say, the story ends with me. It's brilliant, it's messy, and it's deeply human. All right, we filed the reports, scrubbed the blood off the blueprints, and survived 30 years of meta madness. But before I let you two walk out of this studio, I'm putting the entire franchise on the forensic audit chopping block. We've seen the house built, burned down, moved to New York, and reconstructed in Pine Grove. So boys, looking at the entire Scream architecture from 1996 to 2026, what was the absolute high point that defines this legacy for you? And if you were the lead contractor with a blank check, what is the one structural change you'd make to the entire franchise history?
For me, the high point, the capstone of the entire architecture, is still the first 10 minutes of the 1996 original. It's the perfect blueprint. Everything we've discussed for 7 episodes, the subversion of rules, the psychological isolation, the visceral reality of the threat, it was all there with Casey Becker. That sequence didn't just build a house, it built an entire neighborhood that we're still living in today. It's the most influential 10 minutes in modern horror history because it taught the audience that the main character isn't the person on the poster, it's the survival instinct itself. As for the change, if I were the lead contractor, I would have kept the cult of Ghostface from the original Scream 3 blueprints. Before the real-world tragedies of the late 90s forced a rewrite into a solo killer story, the plan was for a massive network of radicalized fans. We saw echoes of that in Scream 2022 and Scream 6, but I think the franchise missed its chance to go full architectural collapse early on. It would have shifted the story from Sydney versus a relative to Sydney versus a movement. It would have made the psychological stakes of the later films feel like a war rather than a recurring nightmare.
The high point for me is a technical one, the Scream 6 subway sequence. Viscerally, that is the peak of the urban predator era. It took everything we knew about Ghostface, the mask, the stealth, the anonymity, and scaled it up to a level where the architecture of a whole city became the weapon. Seeing a dozen ghost faces in one frame and realizing the technical failure of society, the bystander effect, was the most terrifying the mask has ever been. It proved the franchise could survive outside of Woodsboro. The change? The super survivor logic leaks. I'm the visceral guy, and it kills me when the architecture becomes too sturdy. I would have killed off a major legacy character in every second act. Dewey's death in 2022 was a masterstroke because it made the walls feel thin. I would have applied that same technical ruthlessness to Scream 3 or Scream 6. If characters like Chad or Gale feel invincible, the forensic audit loses its tension. Every time a character survives 20 stabs, it adds a logic leak that threatens the foundation. I'd have traded the action hero vibe for more slasher reality.
I'm with you, Marcus. The plot armor can get a bit thick. My high point is the mother-daughter pivot in Scream 7. Psychologically, seeing Tatum look at Sydney and say she's Sydney fucking Prescott's daughter was the ultimate completion of the circle. It justified every trauma Sydney went through because it showed that the legacy wasn't just about pain, it was about the technical transmission of survival. It turned 30 years of victimization into a generational weapon. But my structural change? I would have integrated the stab movies more deeply as a psychological weapon, not just a meta joke. I wanted to see a film where the characters couldn't tell the difference between the real architecture and the set architecture, where the stab films actually started to dictate their reality in a more fever dream way. We touched on it in the Scream 7 opening with the Airbnb, but I wanted a whole movie that felt like that. A total dissolution of the fourth wall that forced Sydney to literally fight her own legend. Granted, we did see the attempt in Scream 3, but it ultimately didn't live up to the hype.
It's been a hell of a renovation project, hasn't it? 7 films later and the floorboards are still creaking.
Wait. Before we kill the feed and walk out into the dark, I've got to open one last drawer in the evidence locker. We've done the audit, we've tracked the technicalities, but we haven't actually put our cards on the table. If we're going to be honest with the Scare Table listeners, we have to rank the architecture. From the penthouse to the basement, what is the definitive ranking of the Scream franchise? I want to know your favorite, your floor filler, and the one entry where the blueprints should have stayed in the shredder.
For me, it's about structural integrity. Does the movie follow its own logic, and does it build something new on the foundation? Scream, 1996, The Blueprint. It's the only slasher where the characters are as smart as the audience. It's perfectly balanced. Scream 2, a masterclass in sequel architecture. It expanded the scope without losing the intimacy of Sydney's story. The soundcheck kill, technical perfection. Scream 6, I love the urban expansion. Moving to NYC proved the Ghostface mythos was strong enough to survive outside the Woodsboro suburbs. Scream 7, 2026. It gets points for the legacy restoration. After the production hell, the fact that it felt this cohesive is a miracle of engineering. Scream, 2022. Solid, but it felt a bit like a model home. It was beautiful, but it was designed specifically to sell the franchise to a new generation. Scream 4. The themes were ahead of their time, but the cinematic filter and the pacing felt like a renovation that ran out of budget halfway through. Scream 3. The Basement. The secret brother twist felt like an add-on that wasn't in the original plans. It broke the reality of the first 2 films.
I'm looking at the trauma. How do these films handle the mental toll of survival and the evolution of the final girl? Scream, 1996. It established the psychology of the modern survivor. Sydney isn't just a victim, she's a deconstruction of every girl who came before her. Scream 7, 2026. My personal high. The mother-daughter dynamic with Tatum is the most emotional the franchise has ever been. It closed the loop on Maureen Prescott perfectly. Scream 4. Jill Roberts is the most psychologically fascinating killer in the series. A killer motivated by the fame of being a victim. Scream 2. The exploration of college-age trauma and the copycat psychology was brilliant. It felt like Sydney was truly being hunted by her past. Scream 6. The core four have great chemistry, but the psychology felt a bit action movie heavy. I missed the quieter, more paranoid moments. Scream 2022. It was a bit too meta for its own good at times. I liked Sam, but the hallucination Billy felt like a psychological step too far into fantasy. Scream 3. The logic leak. Sydney spent most of the movie isolated on a set. The psychological connection to the other characters was severed, and it suffered for it.
Show me the technicality of the hunt. I want aggression, high-stakes kills, and a killer that actually feels dangerous. Scream 6. The bodega, the subway, the ladder. Viscerally, this is the gold standard. This Ghostface was a tank, and the technicality of the kills was 10 out of 10. Scream 1996. The kitchen finale is still the messiest, most visceral standoff in history. The technicality of two killers stabbing each other to look like victims? Genius. Scream 7, 2026. Hannah's death. That kill alone puts this in the top 3 for me. It was surgical, quiet, and mean. Plus, Sydney and Tatum shooting Jessica's face off was the mic drop of the decade. Scream 2. The car escape sequence with Sydney and Hallie is a masterpiece of tension. It's a technical stress test for the characters. Scream 2022. Dewey's death was a visceral gut punch that the franchise needed to prove the stakes were still real. Scream 4. Too many off-screen or quick kills. I wanted more of the chase, less of the punchline. Scream 3. Condemned. The one-man Ghostface taking out entire sets of people with gas leaks? It felt like a cartoon. The technicality was traded for movie magic, and I hated it.
I have one final question to finish off the Scream franchise audit. What kill within the entire franchise was the most impactful, and would you change it or leave it the same?
For me, the one that hit the hardest from a technical and visceral standpoint, Dewey Riley in Scream 2022. Look, we spent 5 movies watching Dewey survive the impossible. He was the franchise's miracle. The guy who could take a blade to the back, the neck, and the chest and still show up for the sequel with a limp and a smile. But in 22, the architecture changed. He didn't just die, he died in a technical standoff. He went back for the headshot, and that moment of professional duty is what Ghostface exploited. Seeing him sliced open in that hospital hallway, up and down the surgical split, was the most visceral reset the series ever had. It told us the legacy armor was gone. The verdict. I'd leave it the same. It was the most honest death in the series. It proved that in the requel era, no one, not even the heart of the franchise, is safe from a technical mistake. It made the stakes 100% real again.
I'm going back to the original foundation for mine, Tatum Riley in Scream 1996. Psychologically, this is the most impactful kill because it represents the death of Sydney's support system. Tatum was the only person who treated Sydney like a human being instead of a tragedy. The kill itself, the garage door, the doggy door, is a technical masterpiece of claustrophobia. But the impact is in the aftermath. Sydney losing her best friend in such a brutal, public way within her sanctuary of friends was the moment her psychological fortress began to crumble. It's the reason she's so overprotective in Scream 7. The Tatum trauma is the core of her motherhood. The verdict. I'd leave it exactly as it is. It's the perfect slasher kill. It's creative, it's mean, and it's a vital structural component of Sydney's evolution from a victim into a survivor.
You guys took the heavy hitters, so I'm going with the one that fundamentally changed the rules for the architects. Randy Meeks in Scream 2. This was the first time the franchise committed narrative arson. Killing the guy who explains the rules to the audience was a brilliant structural move. It happened in broad daylight, in a bright van, in the middle of a crowded campus. It was the ultimate technical subversion. It proved that knowing the rules doesn't save you from the killer's unpredictability. It left the characters, and us, completely blind for the rest of the movie. The verdict. I'm the only one here who would change it. I would have had Randy survive the van, barely, and make it to part 3, only to have him die protecting the rules. Seeing him go out in a more heroic trilogy architectural sacrifice would have hit harder than a quick throat slash in a van. It was a great shock, but losing the voice of the fans that early felt like a logic leak we never quite plugged. I would have easily traded Cotton in part 2 to have Randy die in part 3.
3 legends, 3 distinct ways to go out. The ledger is full.
And the scars are deep.
That's the beauty of a good audit. Even the parts that hurt are built for a reason. Before we lock the doors, we have to acknowledge the reality of this franchise. The house is never truly finished. We've wrapped up this particular forensic audit, but the blueprints for Scream 8 are already being drafted as we speak. In this world, a finale is just a placeholder for the next renovation. So, while we're stepping away from the table tonight, consider this a temporary adjournment. We'll be back with a full amendment the second that first teaser drops.
Technically, the ledger is never closed. Whether it's a new city, a new bloodline, or a new technical way to use a cell phone, Ghostface always finds a logic leak to exploit. And when he does, we'll be right here to audit the carnage. We've seen the foundation hold for 30 years. I'm ready to see what kind of visceral madness they have planned for the next chapter.
Psychologically, the story is far from over. As long as there's trauma to explore and legacies to protect, the scare table will have a reason to meet. We've mapped out the Prescott era, but the future is wide open, and we'll be here to dissect every emotional beat and every mask reveal.
Stay connected to the chaos. GhostfaceHorror.com for the latest news on Scream 8 production, deep dive articles, and the most comprehensive horror media coverage on the web. Make sure you're checking in daily. It's the digital home for everything that goes bump in the night.
If you enjoyed this forensic audit, subscribe to the podcast for more deep dives into the architecture of your favorite horror franchises. We don't just watch movies, we audit them.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into the Scream 1996 to 2026 archives. It's been a wild ride through the history of the Woodsboro survivors.
Keep your eyes on the shadows and your hands on the ledger.
And never, ever assume the story is over just because the credits are rolling.
We'll see you when the phone rings again. Until then, stay safe, if you can.
The scare table